myself when I set the length of my temporary. The October 9th, 2024 special meeting of the Town of Woodside Planning Commission is called to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. We'll now move on to the roll call.
Chair Weaver,
Present.
Vice Chair Gar,
Here.
Commissioner Apfel, Commissioner Ganerko,
Here. Are we expecting Commissioner Apfel tonight?
Commissioner Apfel.
You're muted. Commissioner Apfel.
Hi, I'm present. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Hi, sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties.
Is there a call from anyone for changes to tonight's agenda from what was published?
Only change to the agenda is that we're going to continue the minutes of June 12th to next week's meeting, and we'll have those prepared with your packet tomorrow. And otherwise, I'll just note that, as you're all aware, and you've received a number of desk items for the projects before us today, and then there's a desk item also including a resolution, minor modifications to that, and just for the benefit of the public, there are extra copies in the back. There is just an update to what occurred on the ASRB meeting on Monday night, including the resolution, and then there is a typo in terms of the maximum number of seats allowed for Bucks, and both for Bucks and the Village Bakery, it's been clarified that there's just a maximum number of seats allowed, and there shouldn't be any more seats. So that's been clarified in that desk item. And I'll go through that more with the report.
Are there any public communications tonight?
For those attending via Zoom, please raise your hand if you have a comment for an item not on the agenda. I see no raised hands.
Now is the time for people to speak on items that are relevant to the Planning Commission of Woodside, but are not on tonight's agenda. So we invite members of the public, either live or online, to come up and make a comment. Vicky, there will be an opportunity to comment on the agenda item later. This is a time for public comments on items not on tonight's agenda. Oh, okay. So anyone that has a public comment on tonight's single agenda item, you will get an opportunity to make those comments. But if anyone either online or in person wants to make a comment on an item that's relative to the Planning Commission that is not on tonight's agenda, now is your opportunity for that. So is there anyone that falls into that category? Is there anyone online that falls into that category?
No raised hands online.
Okay. In that case, we will move on to the one and only item on tonight's agenda, which is a package related to an application to expand the parking at Kenyatta Corners, and which also, and that package would involve a number of items, which would include a rezoning, abandonment of an open space easement, number of other conditional use permits, and a number of items related to that. And Sage will present that package.
Thank you, Chair Weaver. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. So I'll give a brief background and then I'll speak about the project, committee reviews, and then the action to be taken by the Planning Commission. So to give a brief background, in 1979, the Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit to construct a 6,000 square foot building for a feed-in hardware store and a 3,500 square foot commercial shop nursery building on the parking lot and the two APNs that comprise Kenyatta Corners. And so what you see on the screen there highlighted are the two assessor parcel numbers that create Kenyatta Corners. The front parcel, number 36, has all of the buildings and some of the parking, whereas the parcel number 35 has a portion of the parking and the open space easement. With that approval, the town required granting of an open space easement on the remaining portion of the rear parcel that did not include a parking lot. It also required an equestrian easement through both of the parcels, a conservation easement along the stream corridor of the front parcel, an equestrian bike and pedestrian easement on the southeast corner of the front parcel. I'll show those easements in a little bit. In 1988, the rear parcel at Kenyatta Corners was further encumbered when the voters approved Measure J, requiring residentially zoned parcels in and adjoining the town center, such as the rear parcel, to remain in a residential use unless commercial parking had been permitted on those properties prior to June 1st, 1988. And that includes the existing portion of the rear parking lot. In 2021, the Measure A was approved by the voters, and that changed the land use regulations for the residentially zoned parcels in the adjacent to the town center. It authorized the installation of surface parking at the rear parcel to accommodate outdoor dining within the Kenyatta Corners Commercial Center. While the voters allowed for modification to the existing open space easement for additional parking on the rear parcel, the property owner was required to apply for an application and all the necessary approvals in order to install that parking and the permanent outdoor dining parklets. So move to the plans. And so in 2016, the town approved the most current conditional use permit. That conditional use permit update was for the Village Bakery. It was to replace the old Woodside Bakery and the old Woodside Gallery. The square footage of the combined square footage of those areas provided an increase, but that was really for a larger kitchen. And the seat count for the Village Bakery was to remain the same, allowing 70 seats to be occupied, allowing 70 seats between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., and a maximum total of 95 seats between 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. No changes were being made to the seat count at that time, between the Woodside Bakery and Village Bakery. And therefore, the property was not required to increase the number of spaces, even though it only had a total of 159 at that time when 173 were required. So this was considered existing legal nonconforming, but there was no increase in parking requirements, therefore it was allowed to be retained. Under the current conditional use permit application, is a proposal for 2 new outdoor dining parklets to serve the existing food service establishments, Bucks and the Village Bakery. The existing CUP for Bucks is allowed to have 120 seats, and the current application would allow for another 24 seats at the outdoor parklet for a total of 144 seats at Bucks. The current application would change the timing restrictions for the Village Bakery, so allowing 95 seats all day long, in addition to another 22 seats for the outdoor dining parklet. This would be a total of 117 seats allowed for the Village Bakery under this application. The project includes a total of 109 parking spaces. This would be enough parking spaces to meet the code requirements for all uses on the property, as well as the proposed outdoor dining parklets and hours of operation changes. I want to go through the easements on the property, and on the plans, this is the way the easements are laid out on the existing property. So the primary easements that we're focused on tonight is the open space easement at the rear parcel that you see here is in this diagonal hatched kind of a pink color. At the corner, what I mentioned before, there was an equestrian, bicycle, and pedestrian easement that was granted at the southeast corner of the property. And that is this kind of orange drain drop hatching that allowed for trail to be placed at the front of the property around that corner, giving it additional space if needed. That also extends across the front of the property in this kind of diagonal fashion. There's also an existing equestrian trail easement on the property. And that easement is currently located immediately adjacent to the northern property line. And it extends along the top of the creek bank. And whereas the trail is located about halfway through the front of the property along the top of the creek bank, but it then meanders through the back of the property. It's not located within the equestrian trail easement. So the current proposal would include an expansion of the parking lot to accommodate all the uses on the site as well as the new outdoor parking. And what you can see here is the modification to the open space easement being proposed. It also has proposed to shift the equestrian easement a little bit further south, so it's not immediately adjacent to the residential property. So it gets it further away from the residents, as well as there are some more trees in that area. It's a little bit steeper. So by moving the trail easement location, a new trail could be constructed there that would be easier and require less tree removal than currently required. So the proposal also, in order to expand the parking lot, there's a fair amount of grading that's necessary. And a retaining wall would be located on the east side of the property along the expanded parking lot. And then it tapers down along the northern side. The highest point, it's about 8 to 10 feet tall. At the lowest point, it's about a couple feet tall. And I just want to share, the applicant is proposing a design, it's using gabion baskets. And so it's not a typical just concrete retaining wall. It's a series of baskets that hold stones in it, and there's certain structural requirements that need to be met. But it's just not a typical concrete retaining wall. And this type of design would be stepped back into the hillside. So next I'll talk about the lighting at the property and what was initially proposed. So the current site has small bollard type lights shown here in type A, and there are taller existing lights noted here as type B. Initially, the applicant proposed to keep those lights as they remain for the existing portion, and then to add 3 more of the 14-foot tall light fixture types. I'll go into a little bit more about what was recommended by the ASRB, and we'll talk a little bit more about lighting in just a little bit. But I will note that shorter lights have been recommended as a condition of approval, and ASRB did ask for a lighting plan that identifies shorter lights. The property includes a fair amount of tree removal, mostly fruit trees and small oak trees. There would be a removal of 23 significant trees while relocating 6 of the smaller oaks, proposing 8 new fruit trees within the parking lot and parklets. I should also note that there's a total of 45 non-significant trees, so much smaller trees that are also being proposed for removal. This property went to the Open Space Committee, the Trails Committee, and the Circulation Committee. The Open Space Committee reviewed the project and generally recommended against the removal of any portion of the open space easement. The Trails Committee reviewed the project twice. They reviewed it back in 2022 as well as September of this year. They ended with their recommendations to, there's been talk about formally opening up the equestrian easement on the property to also allow pedestrians. At that time, the Trails Committee recommending to leave the existing trail easement where it's currently located, so immediately adjacent to the northern property line, and to keep the use intact for equestrians only. The Circulation Committee reviewed the project, and they noted that the project could negatively impact circulation through the town center, but if approved, that the town should allow pedestrians to share that path. There's a discussion about bicycles also being formally allowed to use the path. It's common practice that bicycles and equestrians typically don't share the same trails due to potential conflicts, and both the previous and current town engineer have continued with that recommendation. So there is a current recommended condition of the project to allow for pedestrians to share the path with equestrians. So both the Trails Committee and the Circulation Committee, they also noted that the applicant should do more improvements to the existing trails around the site. So currently, the property along Kenyatta Road, there's an existing trail that comes down Kenyatta Road, and it goes then around in front of the property along Woodside Road, connecting back up to Woody the Fish. And both of the committees recommended that the applicant provide some additional safety improvements, some drainage improvements to that trail. And I'll talk a little bit about that with the applicant's response to the ASRB. So on September 23rd, the ASRB provided their initial review of the project. After detailed public testimony, the ASRB continued the item with the following recommendations for the applicant: to clarify the number of seats being used at the Village Bakery today, to revise the plans to show improvements to the on-site trails as well as the trails that are adjacent to the site, similar to what the Circulation Committee recommended. The ASRB asked the applicant to look into adjusting the entire rear parking lot a little bit further to the east to allow the ability for maybe some more landscaping on the western side of the parking lot. The ASRB also asked the applicant to really provide a comprehensive exterior plan that replaces all the existing lights, so not just adding new ones, but to really look at the existing lights in the back and replace those, as well as provide the newly proposed lights, and looking for lighting that was closer to the ground. Lastly, the ASRB asked the applicant to look at providing additional bicycle parking near the hardware store. So the applicant responded to the ASRB, made some revisions to the plans. And the first comment was about looking at the existing parking and, the existing seat count for the Village Bakery. And what we have before us is a current application for additional seats at the 2 businesses to remove the seating restriction for the bakery and to accommodate the amount of parking required for all the uses on the site. And so all of this has been wrapped into this application. That's what's before you tonight. This was in an effort for the owner to carry out the requirements of Measure A. So the applicant was looking at the different trails and provided some proposed improvements. So for the on-site trail, they looked at different path slopes. So they showed the existing path, the path A, they note here. This is the existing trail that cuts through the property. It's currently not located within a recorded easement. It's just been informally used over a number of years. Then there's path B, that is the proposal that the applicant initially had to remove the easement a little bit further away from the property line to the north, that has a less steep slope as well as fewer trees to be removed. During the different meetings, there was conversations about having maybe a more meandering path behind the parking lot, maybe one that would be less steep in slope, that could accommodate potentially for bikes or for those walking. The applicant provided these three different alternatives, noting that path A would not be feasible if the parking lot is approved. And then for path B or path C, they both have an average slope of around 6%, with path B being slightly shallower slope than path C. So here we'll go and we'll look at the trails along the outside of the property. So this sheet here better shows the location of the existing trail along Kenyatta Road. This trail has a significant buffer of vegetation, as well as topography change from the adjacent roadway. There could be some minor improvements that could be made there, maybe where any type of little potholes or something could be filled. But for the most part, this trail is intact and in decent condition. As you go further south towards the corner at Woodside Road and Kenyatta Road, the trail, it has definitely some degradation there. It's some erosion has occurred. So there's definitely the availability for some safety improvements there, some grading improvements. It kind of right now meanders through the tree. The applicant is proposing actually to try to shift that over a little bit more to get it further away from the intersection, as well as connecting it to a more defined trail along the front of the property. They're proposing to install a crosswalk to help better identify the crossing area at the first driveway. And then as they get to the second driveway to the west, that driveway is a little bit pushed further back. So what they've done is they've moved the trail closer to the parking stalls and was able to pull it back from the actual point in which it connects to Woodside Road, providing another crosswalk. So these are some of the details that the applicant has provided. As you can see here, these provide a little bit more close-up of what I've just described. And so as far as shifting the property further to the expanded parking lot further to the east, the applicant looked at that. Staff has also acknowledged that as the hillside gets relatively steep here, to move it further east would require a significant more amount of grading. And it's really the idea was to accomplish a little bit more of a buffer here for the allowance of more landscape planting. In order to do that, you'd really have to shift this entire lot over, and any significant shift over would really impede the circulation through the site. It would start having, as the lane kind of travels here, if these spaces are shifted over, may not have enough room to actually maneuver through the site and meet the fire district requirements for circulation. So for those reasons, the applicant did not move the expanded parking lot over further to the east. Staff has recommended a condition. There is the ability to provide some landscaping between the top of the creek bank and the parking lot itself. So there's a recommended condition for that. So the applicant's response to the lighting, they came back with with new 14-foot tall lights shown here, but fewer of them, and they would just be placed in the medians, noting, light to shine down the parking lot, providing for enough light for security, as well as for safe passage around the site. During the meeting, the applicant noted that these particular fixtures could be lowered slightly, although can't get too low, there'd be conflicts with cars backing into them, given that they're kind of these overhang lights. They also noted that, light fixtures come in a lot of different types. There's Kelvin levels, which really regulate the amount of kind of the bright white lights towards the yellow light. That's a little bit more of a calmer light. And the applicant noted that they'd be willing to use kind of the more yellow light that's not as bright, and could even look at, timing on when those lights could be turned off and on. And then I will note that the applicant there wasn't really the ability to put some additional bike parking near the hardware store. Just across from the hardware store, did provide some additional bike parking near the existing salon. So after the review, this was just this past Monday night on the 7th, ASRB reviewed the changes. They were generally okay with the project overall. They continued to have concerns about the lighting plan. They still were recommending that the applicant explore lower lighting. And just to give a little background on staff's recommendation for the lower lighting, there's still recommended condition that 6A8, and this is for the light fixtures to be no taller than 5 feet. This is understanding that there's likely going to need to be a need for more light fixtures than the fewer taller ones. The idea was to try to keep lighting lower to the ground, which could provide fewer impacts to neighbors, and it would be something similar to what we have out here, although I'd say in an upgraded to today, the 2024 version of what we have in the parking lot in front of Town Hall. So there's some examples of that in the town center already, given what's in front of Town Hall. And so that recommended condition, especially based on ASRB's review, is still located on the recommended resolution. The applicant has provided some additional safety improvements for the trails around the property, as we've discussed. The ASRB wanted the applicant to continue looking at how that could be further enhanced for safety. Some ideas are providing more of at least a visual kind of barrier between the trail and Woodside Road at the corner, similar to the short, small kind of wooden fences that are out there along the middle part of the parking lot. There's also an opportunity for other signage for those on bikes or pedestrians walking across the crosswalks to have a little heightened awareness, given that cars are traveling in and out of the parking lot. And so there's still recommended condition 6A7, and that would allow for additional safety improvements to the satisfaction of the town engineer. We still, regarding landscaping, we've worked on this in other sites in town where, although as you get to the western side of the proposed parking lot expansion, it's a stream corridor, but stream corridors are not completely untouchable. If someone is enhancing those areas with riparian vegetation that's recommended by a biologist, we've actually worked on this in a number of sites in town. And there's the ability to provide between the trail and the parking lot, as well as on the west side of the trail, there's the ability to plant some more parking before you get to the break and slope of the top of Bank. And so there's still a condition of a recommended condition of approval for this open space enhancement plan that will ensure any part of the open space area that remains and that is disturbed would have additional planting replaced. Would also have the ability to kind of enhance and provide additional landscaping where none occurs now. There's been security concerns raised for the back of the parking lot. There's been talk about possibly doing some type of security barrier whether it's a gate at the front or maybe between, the hardware store, the back part of the parking lot. The applicant has indicated that there may be some trouble in actually making sure that those gates are open and closed or some type of barrier is installed, and preferred not to install a security gating at this time. Although, given the security concerns, staff has still recommended conditional approval 1L that would have the applicant look at providing some type of security barrier that would be closed during hours when the business is closed. And that would limit the ability for people to park in back of the site when the businesses are not open. So what you have before you today is a number of entitlements that are required, such as the grading exception, the conditional use permit, the modifications, the open space easement. And staff recommends tonight that provide any questions that you have for staff. We can go through those, then allow the applicant to provide their presentation, hear from various members of the public that are directed to the Planning Commission for that consideration. And then to kind of structure the deliberation, the Planning Commission may want to use the resolution and kind of go through the different entitlements to determine if the findings can be made, and if the Planning Commission determines the findings can be made, at the end are the recommended conditions of approval. And that would be an area in which if the commission wanted to remove, modify, or add any conditions of approval, that could be done at that time. But with that, I just want to note that this is not the final action on the project. The Planning Commission's decision is a recommendation to the Town Council, given that the Town Council has to provide review of some of the entitlements required. Therefore, they will take action on the entire project. So the Planning Commission will provide a recommendation, and therefore the recommendation is not appealable. Final action will be taken by the Town Council, and that's tentatively scheduled for October 22nd. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Richard, I'll give you a chance to lead off with any questions that you have for Sage.
So, just a clarification, Sage, regarding the path, the trail. So the one on the east side along Kenyatta, on the right side, the long one,
Yes.
that currently is just a trail for people?
It's could be used for bikes, equestrians, or pedestrians. So it's in the public right of way, and there's not a restriction on the uses in the public right of way.
And the objections to, the objections to having bicycles and, let's say, horses use that trail, is that applying to the one on the right or the one that is proposed through the back and the left side of the property?
It's the one going through the property. So this one here, that would go through the easement. So typically, when you have easements, they might be for pedestrians and equestrians, or sometimes just for equestrians. Whereas the trails within the right-of-way don't have restrictions. There are bike lanes that are along Kenyatta Road and Woodside Road as well.
Mm-hmm. In this case, there are obviously no bike lanes on the west side, on the left side.
Correct. That's just,
I was reading one letter from a resident indicating that trail is currently used by the one on the, I guess on the west side, is used by children attending school, mostly in the morning and in the afternoon when they're returning. So that becomes a little bit contentious or a problem when you have horses there also, right? So there is no issues with the one on the right, because kids on bikes don't use that one. They tend to use the one through.
the one in the public right of way, there's just not a restriction on the use. With the one,
Is there an issue?
there has not been an issue to my knowledge.
Uh-huh. Yes.
We're still having questions to staff. You'll have the opportunity.
Well, she might. I don't mind having a little input, unless.
You will get a chance to speak later. Let's let Richard finish his questions to Sage and then get it all out on the table. And then you may have more things to say on other topics as well. So,
So the trail on the left, we'll have a chance to discuss that and look at the
Yes, and
proposals.
sorry to interrupt. I should note that the applicant has proposed to provide signage that may identify different hours of operation for bikes to go through the site. It's not something that is specifically in the plans, but they've noted that they'd be open to providing some signage there. Ultimately, that would be something that for the planning commission to recommend and the town council to consider to formally allow bicycles within that easement.
And the preponderance of use is currently the trail on the left through the proposed parking lot, or is it a combination of the one on the east side and the one through?
I couldn't say. I know there's the trail on this path A is heavily used. I've been out there myself.
The one through the park?
Through the parking lot, so it's not located within the easement at this time. And so that is heavily used. I've seen children, I've seen adults. I haven't seen personally, I'm not out there every day, adults on bikes, but I do see kids on electric scooters, electric bikes, bicycles, kids walking through the site. It's definitely been observed.
And then on the lighting, a question about the lighting. I don't quite understand how a 5-foot or lower light would adequately light up the area for security reasons and just utility.
Yeah,
So-
it's looking at the balance of impacts to neighbors, security. What we were looking at the staff level was just kind of the example that we have out here in our parking lot. So when we leave tonight, we'll all get another opportunity to see how dark it is. So areas kind of here towards Whiskey Hill Road don't have any light fixtures and it's very dark. Whereas you come more into the center area there's some of the lower light fixtures, and admittedly, they do not light up the area as much as a taller light fixture would. But it does provide some areas for at least safe circulation.
And sort of a corollary to that, on the left side, the west side, as far as the screening and the trees that will be transplanted and trees proposed, will they be tall enough initially to mitigate, obtrusive lighting to neighbors?
Typically, trees when they're installed are very small. Could be a variety of vegetation that is installed. I can't guarantee that it would block out all lights on the property. It would help to screen the property.
So the trees that are being transplanted are not necessarily large trees.
No, they're smaller trees. To transplant most of the trees actually in the back there are relatively small. We don't have any large significant specimen trees out there that are being removed. But the trees being removed are being proposed to be located kind of back towards Kenyatta Road.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Apfel online, did you have questions for Sage?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry to be remote. I wish I could have been there in person. So my first question is just to get into the record and clarify, did Measure A include any language at all about expanding restaurant seating capacity, or was it strictly about parking spaces and parklets? Can you just clarify what Measure A actually approved?
It was to allow outdoor dining and to accommodate that outdoor dining to allow expanded surface parking on the rear parcel.
Okay, so just to reconfirm, there was no language in Measure A that was voted on by the people that was about expanding restaurant seating capacity. Is that correct?
It was to expand the parking for the parklets.
Right, and presumably that was to enable more people to attend the restaurants in what was then the current configuration. I'm just want to get that into the record that there was no vote on expanding restaurant seating. Thank you. My next question is, can you just clarify the grading issue on that east side, Sage? What was the objection was that a financial decision? You mentioned something about the fire district not permitting them to move the parking further east. And can you just clarify exactly what the applicants and the town, the staff's objection was to moving that parking lot?
Sure, the applicant can better speak to their position.
Okay,
you know,
I
as you
thought that
cut
might be
in-
the case.
But to clarify what I explained is that as you take this area that's kind of diagonally to the side, as you start to move it to the east, now you have this aisle width here that starts to get pushed over here, and to get
Yes.
through the aisle width gets trickier, as well as moving the aisle width over here, and that creating the circulation needed for the fire district could be problematic. But it would require some looking at the circulation, depending on how much you move it over. There's not a lot of space.
Sorry, can I interrupt? This is just for clarification. But you couldn't move it even further into the slope because of the slope of the hill? I'm just wondering why we can't move it closer to the large street as opposed to the rural creek.
Sure.
And is that a great, is that like, if that's a financial reason or like extra cost to do it, that's an entirely different conversation than, oh, well, we were actually restricted by some kind of a code or again, you mentioned fire district, and I just was confused as to what the rationale was.
So when I talked about the fire district, I was talking about circulation to these aisle widths. So
Okay,
if you just push this, you might need to start then further pushing over some of the existing parking stalls to make sure that this aisle can actually connect appropriately. So you can actually drive through these. Otherwise, these center spaces start to move over as well. And to
Mhm.
navigate through there becomes more difficult. And as you cut into a steep slope, every few feet is a significant amount more cubic yards. So it just is additional grading, also would require some additional tree removal. So there's
got
not
it. But ultimately, it's not impossible to do it engineering wise. It's just a cost and complexity issue. Is that correct?
there are other, yes.
Okay.
And the question is for what gain, how far can you actually move it over? There's also, as the applicant noted at the ASRB, I didn't mention here, a sewer easement over on that side, which also provides some limitation.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I have maybe one or two more questions. Sorry. For the retaining wall that was proposed, which I think was like, I forget what you called it, there were rocks inside of chicken wire. Sorry if that's inaccurate. Maybe this is a better question for the applicant, but like, I'm just wondering what the thinking was behind that as a retaining wall as opposed to something more significant. Was that
Sure,
aesthetic?
I think it's an aesthetic. The applicant can best speak to it. I've seen gabion walls used in different applications. I've actually seen them used in Woodside. I've seen them used on creek banks actually for bank stabilization. They do allow for drainage as well, a little bit better drainage through the walls. But the
Got it.
applicant can best speak to the construction of it.
Got it. I'll hold that question or ask it again. I'm sorry to waste everyone's time. My final question. Can you educate us and the audience on the standards for lighting and concealment? In other words, how are we supposed to consider a commercial property versus a residential property in terms of what obligations there are for an applicant to come up with a concrete plan for lighting and concealment, as opposed to like, we'll work with the town? I'm just wondering how those differ between a residential and a commercial property.
So the main difference between residential and commercial is that commercial is allowed to have fixtures up to 14 feet tall. Only time that can be applied in a residential setting is with approval of a tennis court. So there's a height difference there that's distinguished for commercial.
Got it.
Otherwise, to be shielded and downward facing, that remains the same both for commercial and residential. And then so these are just zoning code requirements in the town of Woodside. So it's the town's preference, but they are codified. And whereas I triple checked with the building department about what requirements are allowed for commercial parking, the building official confirmed to me that if there's not a step or it's not an entrance or an exit to a building, there are not any building code requirements for commercial parking lots. So it's typically done for safe navigation and security.
Got it. And one really quick, sorry, one really quick related question. Do you, I guess what I was trying to get at was if we're trying to change it, like I understand from my time on the ASRB that it's a recommending agency. But most of the plans that we looked at were actually very concrete, right? We knew exactly where the trees would go. We knew exactly where lighting would go. There had to be a formal plan. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is in just listening and reading the materials, I don't see a lot of detail and plan in some of the things that have been talked about here. And I'm wondering if that's normal par for the course for a commercial application versus residential.
Well, we don't get a lot of commercial applications, but
Okay.
within the ASRB application, it's not uncommon for a project to be approved, for an applicant to revise lighting. It's not uncommon for a project to be approved with a condition for the applicant to provide additional landscaping. So these are outcomes of the various committee meetings and therefore recommended conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll stop now and save some questions for the applicant. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Gar, you're up.
All right, thank you. First, a couple questions about the pathway. So the current path, I guess path A, the diagonal one. As far as I know, there's no posting in terms of restrictions there. It's used by, kids going to school. And I just want to confirm, has there ever been any restriction posted for that?
Not that I'm aware of.
in-
Yeah, no, typically trails aren't posted. There are sometimes ones that go through the private residential properties in which they've been clarified for folks that they're for equestrians only.
So the
Sense.
follow-up would be in the proposed new called back path,
Sure.
B or C. What would be I guess what was the rationale on there being potential restrictions added in terms of the hours that bikes could use that trail? Because that seems like an additional restriction that would put kids in more danger if they're having to use the front path. There's 2 additional crossings.
Mhm.
And what's the rationale for, I guess, restricting something that hasn't been restricted?
So currently, in terms of, there hasn't been a sign posted, but the easement only allows for equestrians. It doesn't allow for any other type of mode of transportation. So the project and the conditions are proposing to formalize the allowance for kids or adults to walk through the site as well. And then the applicant has went further to suggest to posting a site that would identify hours in which bicycles should be able to go through the site.
And is there a reason? I mean, there's many trails in town that do have posting in terms of the usage for predominantly equestrian. Is there a reason this trail, I guess, hasn't had that? Because for all intents and purposes, I would assume that, can't speak for everyone, but my assumption has always been that that's just general use. I'm sure kids who are using it have an assumption that it's not an equestrian easement, irrespective of what's on the books.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pathway in which people have traveled through for a number of years. It's not, I mean, it's not even a constructed trail within an easement. It's just an area which people have traveled through and kind of created those pathways as that typically occurs.
Next question on the paths is with paths B and C, it looks like there are 2 different options and then they converge. Is there any ability to actually separate where B and C converge? Is there maybe enough space to have parallel paths such that they're,
It's a good question. It was actually raised at the circulation committee. Would there be ability to kind of have, modes of transportation separated adjacent to each other? I think in the back portion, there's probably more room there. It would eat up a little bit more of the open space easement. But as they converge, there's just not a lot of room along the top of Bank. And it probably would prove difficult to have 2 separated paths there between the parking lot, even without the expanded parking lot, just between the existing parking lot and the top of Bank.
and in that granted difficult, do we know that it's infeasible or is that something that could be studied?
It's something that could be studied. It is in a stream corridor, so trails are allowed in a stream corridor. It's something that could be looked at further. But I just, you have the 15-foot wide equestrian easement here. It starts to get close to the top of Bank. So if you see here on the drawing, The blue line is the top of Bank. And so as you kind of get into some of these pinch points where the existing parking lot exists, it may prove difficult there.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, this wasn't discussed yet, but there was a restriction in the packet with respect to outdoor music. One particularly nice evening at Bucks some time back with some outdoor bluegrass music, not amplified at the time. I saw it both amplified and non-amplified prohibited, and I was curious kind of where that came from in the thinking, given that
Yeah,
outdoor dining is often enhanced by the presence of some pleasant music.
sure. This is just new outdoor dining near residences. So it was a recommendation made by staff. I think with music, whether it's allowed or restricted, it's good to make sure that's clarified in the conditional use permit. If the commission had the will to allow for some type of music out there, that condition could be modified.
Thank you. And potentially could be deferred to the applicant, but the parklets, do appear to be quite a bit smaller than the current outdoor seating in terms of the quantity. Do we know any thoughts, or would that be best saved for the applicant in terms of the size of the?
Yeah, I mean, I'll ultimately defer to the applicant, but I think part of it is one, providing enough parking spaces, enough ADA parking spaces. So that's important. Also, the need to provide bicycle parking. So they've provided that between the two parklet areas, which doesn't exist. So I think it's part of, as they get larger, one, you take up more spaces, and two, you require more spaces. And so I think it had kind of the push and pull of the need to expand the parking lot.
And are we up against the maximum at this point? In other words, the parklets are maxed out given the number of spots proposed in the current.
The number of seats they've proposed and all the uses on the site would equal the maximum number of spaces being proposed. So there is no extra.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Sage, as far as my own questions, the neighbors' concerns about after-hours occupancy of the rear parking lot area for, noisy or other unexpected activities. Did the idea for the gates come from the neighbor or the applicant, or what was the origination of that?
I believe that the neighbors provided the suggestion. I don't completely recall, but that was a way to look at restricting the use back there. But I know there was, at the staff level and the planning department, over the years, I haven't heard of anything, but that doesn't mean things don't occur. If people have contacted the sheriff, I wasn't able to get any information from the sheriff on any specific calls that they've had out there. The owner and neighbors can probably best speak to what actually occurs out there. But that was the impetus for having the restricted access to eliminate the availability for people to park back there after hours.
But as far as your understanding, the desire is just to ensure that there's nothing going on in the parking lots that would generate noise or debris or anything after hours versus, some other reason to require gates as the one and only possible solution.
That is the reason for the proposed restrictions to the parking.
Moving on to the CUP, and just to get this out on the record, on the CUPs for the restaurant, the definition of a seat is pretty much the broad definition that a normal untrained civic planner would have for what a seat is and is not.
Yes, it would be a seat or a stool.
And so bar stools count, bar spaces count.
Yes, bar stools count. Yeah.
And casual seating outside. And since there's no separate call out for the retail side of the bakery, the casual seats that are outside the retail portion of the bakery, the tables and chairs there for people to have a coffee that they picked up, those would count.
Correct. Anybody who has something to take out and sits in any of the stools or seating in the dining areas, they would be occupying part of the maximum seats.
And then in the CUP itself, we're actually only calling out the maximum number of seats in each business entity, and we're not specifying whether those are indoor or outdoor seats, correct?
That's correct. They could be, you could have pursuant to whatever's allowed for occupancy loads, you could provide more outdoor, indoor, but that's something that could be looked at as part of the CUP.
Um, but not required at this point in the CUP, so the business owners would have the freedom to seasonally move seats as they thought they could best manage to take advantage of clement weather or inclement weather, correct?
That's correct, as long as it complies with occupancies for fire district occupancy, meaning that you can shove more seats than the fire district would allow.
And then in the proposed CUP, just as I believe, in the proposed CUP, there is a statement that says that no temporary or permanent roof is allowed on the patio area of the bakery that's next to the hardware store.
That's correct.
And so the current roof that's on there is a relic of the pandemic, or that is something that was unpermitted?
It may be part of what was done with the temporary CUP for the pandemic. I'm not sure. That has expired. So yeah, there should not be covered outdoor dining back there.
And then with regard to the impact of the proposed parking lot on the neighbors, I listened in on the ASRB meeting, and one of the ideas that was thrown around was the potential for a wall on the Kenyatta Corner side of the stream corridor.
Yes, the applicant mentioned that they'd be willing to install like a 4-foot wall there that could possibly help block for light projection into the properties across the creek.
And the 4-foot number came from,
That's something they mentioned. The site's a little bit taller than the sites across the creek. May want to be careful of having something too tall, especially if it's solid. Again, given security concerns, if people are walking back there on the trail, may want to at least create some ability for adults to be seen through there.
where was the vision for where the wall would be
It
located?
would be located between the trail and the parking lot, because then it would not be in the stream corridor.
Oh, okay, so we can't wall on the edge of the stream corridor and have a trail on the,
That creates a lot more difficulty. It's not something that's being allowed use in the stream corridor. It's not something contemplated by the biological report.
all right, but the stream corridor does end at some point, right?
Correct. It's right up against where it's this red line that you see on the plan before you.
Okay, and so the stream corridor ends and that's right where the trail starts?
Trails are allowed to be in the stream corridor.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That was it for my questions. So I believe now we can move on to a presentation by the applicant and or their representative.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Lee Prince, Land Use Attorney for the applicant. So I am going to go over at a very high level, a lot
Excuse
of
me,
it.
Lee, could you just
Yes.
speak right into the microphone to make sure everyone? hears
Sorry.
you? No problem.
Better?
Let's move up and down if you need to adjust the height.
Yeah, I'm not very tall. I'm going to talk at a high level about a number of the things we've heard come up over the various meetings. Also, Dave Tanner is here. He's going to be the guy who's going to answer a lot more of the detailed questions about the way the parking lot was designed, the lighting, some of the very fine details. He's the plans guy, and I'm kind of the big picture person. So just kind of wanted to start with a little bit of the background for Kenyatta Corners. There have been, as Sage mentioned, he did a great job on that report, a number of use permit amendments over the years in 1984, 98, 2010, and 2016. Use permit amendments were approved with seating for Bucks in the bakery with a parking deficit. So we've heard a lot over the last number of meetings complaining about the overseating at the bakery. And I did point out to the ASRB as well, you know, this is not a code enforcement action. You're here to take a look at the plan that's proposed and not focus on whether or not people have counted seats, right? The idea is to take a look at the project that's in front of you. And we'll get to that. This goes with the timeline. So in 2020, there was a temporary outdoor dining allowed to provide community gathering place during COVID. I think there was a question about whether that covering was permitted. That's the first time I've heard that, but I was talking to Christine Roberts and she said that is actually a permitted covering. I think that condition is related to just where the umbrellas are right now that are not permanent. Anyway, in 2021, following the use of the outdoor dining, Measure A approved surface parking at the rear of Caminata Corners to accommodate the permanent outdoor dining. And that's what is in front of you today, right? It's a response to the community's desire to see this outdoor community amenity retained. And so in 2022, the very next year, the applicant applied for improvements of the rear parcel with the surface parking to address both the deficit that's historically been there, as well as the desire to see the outdoor parking, the outdoor dining remain. And I will note, because you'll hear a lot about parking, parking has been an issue at the site for a very long time. I'll touch on it a little bit later, but even if you look in your general plan that was done in 2010, well before the 2020 outdoor dining, parking's been an issue that the community has wanted to see addressed in this location. So here's the parking. I tried to simplify this. There's a table that is in the plans, and it really gets a little confusing because there's a lot going on. So I just wanted to kind of make it simple and straightforward. Bucks has 120 seats. That requires 48 spaces. If you add the parklet, while it wasn't specifically called out in Measure A that there would be additional seating, one would anticipate when you add space outdoor for dining and you have existing space indoors, you're going to be adding some seats. And so that would require 10 spaces. The Village Bakery has 95 seats, which require 38 spaces. If you add those 22 seats at the park, my numbers may be a little bit off there, you end up with 9 additional spaces. Everything else in the center has 84 spaces. So right now there's 155 spaces. That was the parking deficit. The total required spaces for all of the uses that are on site plus the 2 parklets would be 189 spaces. That's a delta of 34 spaces. 19 of those are for the parklet and 15 are to bring everything up to municipal code compliance. Okay, go ahead.
Can you clarify existing spaces? Is that the actual physical spaces or what you would need with the deficit?
So that's probably a Dave question, but those are what would be, I think, existing if the parklets weren't there. So that's what's historically been there. Right now, the parklets are taking up some of those spaces. Yeah, sorry about the typo. Okay. Okay, so this is just, I like to think by the numbers. So this is how I see things. Like the 34 additional spaces comprise less than 18% of the total spaces required. The 19 parklet spaces comprise 10% of the total spaces. So that just sort of gives you some perspective. This is not a giant increase in the parking that we're looking at. It may feel that way, and understandably, every time there's change in a community, it brings out people and a lot of emotions. But to kind of put a perspective, it's 8,778 square feet. And with that, 70% of the existing open space will remain. So we've heard a lot about screening and the trees. So this photo actually comes from the tree inventory that was done by a arborist. And they note that most of the trees at the north end will be retained. I've spent a lot of time walking the site over the last few days. And this is towards the end of the area where the neighbor who's concerned about screening is directly across that fence. So there are a lot of trees that will stay, and the applicant is willing to work with the town and the biologist to install additional appropriate screening. We don't know exactly what that is. We need a biologist to tell us, but I will tell you that the applicant is willing to do that. I also encourage you, if you haven't gone out to walk the site, to walk the site. There are some stakes with pink flags that kind of show you where the parking is going to be angled to give you a sense of how much distance there is between where the parking lot is going to be and the neighboring property. It is, in my opinion, fairly well screened, and that screening will be retained. Okay, so let's talk about trail options. And I know there were a number of questions, so I'm going to try and hit on those questions too. So as Sage mentioned, Path A is the existing path through the open space. It is not a dedicated easement. In fact, the easement itself is for open space and for, it's just supposed to remain in open space for natural uses. It's not even technically supposed to be for a path, but people are using it as a path. And so path B is where the easement is currently located, the dedicated one. There was some discussion about originally path B had more of a severe right angle. Severe is kind of a strong word, but a stronger right angle than is there. There were some comments about softening that. So that is shown here as well. And as Sage mentioned, path C was kind of an option to create that meandering path. I will say that after some of the trails and open space committees, I talked to Liz Kerr about these paths and about the safe routes to school and the number of kids who bike along the path. You know, and so we sharpened our pencils, we sat down and we thought, well, how can we make this work for the kids? So if path A goes away, what are some good options? So we softened the curve on path B as an option, and then, you know, Dave came up with path C to create that. I will say that the slope was a topic of conversation. And so in looking at these slopes, everything is around 6%. If you take a look at California State Park guidance on slopes that are appropriate for children, it's in the 10 to 12% range where the slope becomes, you know, unacceptable for children. These are all well below that. And then to answer the question about the signage, it wasn't necessarily to place a restriction on the use of the trail during those periods around the beginning and end of school, but it was to put signage up so that equestrians would know to expect bicyclists. I mean, I will say I was out there this afternoon and I saw some kids on bikes go by, and then a couple minutes later, I saw some horses go by. And so I think that this is a site with good visibility. And so if we put some signs out, it might be just a way to create some awareness, improve that safety. I mean, going back to the California State Park guidance, which I spent a lot of time with, multi-use trails are not uncommon. They actually propose some specific signage. So it's really something we're willing to do to make it work for the whole town, right? The goal here is that the increased parking will benefit the town that's been asking for improved circulation parking at the site. It'll also improve two paths, both for equestrians and pedestrians and bicyclists. Okay. So then this is just a little bit, because you're going to have to make those findings for all the various permits we're asking for, to highlight that this is a community benefit that's consistent for the general plan. There's actually a letter in the packet from Bucks that says, you know, limited parking is a daily complaint by countless guests, and customers love the outdoor seating, right? That was Measure A. That's why we're here. The circulation policy in the general plan identifies that commercial areas have limited parking, and the town has actually adopted policies to improve commercial district circulation, traffic flow, and parking in these areas. So really, this is an area, and you can see it's in that yellow in the back, where the goal is to improve the whole community. It's not something that we're doing just to make a bunch of money. It's something that we're doing to improve the community. I mean, Roberts and the center have been around for a long time, and they're an institution, and they are part of this community as much as anyone else. Okay, and I'll touch on lighting, but Dave's really your guy here. The municipal code currently allows a maximum of 14-foot outdoor lighting in parking areas. You can see that photo there. The existing lighting complies with that. The applicant, I proposed 12 feet, which Sage showed earlier, the kind of squiggly lines. I don't have that, but that was with a height of 12 feet. Dave is definitely working to see if those can be lowered in that central location to 10 feet. We do think that the central location is a good idea because it actually brings it in further away from the neighbors, and still provides adequate lighting for safety and security concerns. The applicant is concerned that the 5-foot lighting fixtures might be too low. And also there aren't those same islands in the parking that's proposed that exist there. So there's some concern that they'll get hit too. And then also, if you could just go back to the last slide really quickly, I do want to point out that one of the thoughts, oh, maybe two back, sorry. One of the thoughts with Path C also, if you want to think about it, it does pull away those that use further from the neighbor as well. Okay, thanks, Sage. Sorry to make you flip. Okay, and I think that is it for me, although I'm happy to answer questions, and if things come up in public comment, would love the opportunity to respond, but I'm gonna let Dave talk about some of the details. Thank you.
All right, given no questions, Dave, you're up.
Okay, now. Different being on this side of the mic. So, I'm the one who created this plan and spent a lot of hours trying to get everything we could into it. It was like putting 5 gallons of water in a 1-gallon jug to get everything what everybody wants and try to make everybody happy. So we've been working on the trails. That was one of the big things that was done in the first meetings we had. So I sat there and stared at it. I walked a lot, many times to see what the feel would be. And they asked for the least amount of rise in the trail. There's part of the trail, the upper part that is up near Kenyatta Road, which you can't change. That is the steepest part right there. So all 3 of those little trails there, the existing, so on and so forth, has that slope to it. Only way you can change that is by adding dirt or changing everything around, and it just complicates it even more. So I added the curve into the final, let's see, Trail C. I think Sage could put the trails up. Please, thank you. It's okay, I get paid by the hour. Okay, so wound up with Path C. And Path C gave us the best feel, all right? It meanders. It's just pretty close to almost the same distance as the Path A is right now. And so I thought that would be the best way to handling it. And it also doesn't disturb trees. It doesn't disturb the ground. It's just a path. And then I really had a lot of thoughts about all these paths. Path A is, when you think about it for signage, everybody's been using it for, I can't tell you how many years. Everybody's been cutting through this lot. There's no signage. Horses use it, people use it, bikes use it, everybody uses it. It's just a sign. I don't know why we would need one, but everybody talks about having a sign to tell everybody who's going to be on the trail. So I know it's, to me, it's, we can put it in if you want it, but we put it, we'll say what you want it to say, but I don't think it's necessary, to tell you the truth. Okay, stepping forward, moving the parking lot over. As Sage said, moving the parking lot over, it was not about money, I can tell you that. I barely could squeeze that parking lot in to get it built what we have. I was restricted, mostly, if you can pull the plan up, Sage, it'd be great. Mostly it's restricted by the creek setbacks, the trails, and on the Kenyatta side, we have a sewer easement inside there we can't get into. So to do the work I have to do, we have to batter back the walls when we're constructing it, and I'm just barely making it in to make it legal for code when we're working. So OSHA steps in and tells us what we have to do there. So it's kind of squeezed in there the best we could. We can't narrow it. The alleyways going through between the pathways, or what do you want to call them, between where the cars are parked, are at a minimum. I can't make them any smaller. We're pretty tight in there now. And I don't think the fire department, they said it was allotted to their codes, but we couldn't make them any smaller. So it's kind of hard to move something without just making the whole thing go away. And then it doesn't, the whole project might as well just stop, because it's not going to help anybody. When it came down to the seating, we're just barely making, if we have the seating that is existing today, there's not enough parking for it. And with the parklets added, we'd have to add more parking to make everything compliant and also bring what today is up to compliance. And one of the problems that nobody thinks about is they use the ratio of 2.5 for for a car for each table, all right, for the chairs, all right? 2.5 chairs equals 1 car parking space. And if you've ever noticed what happens in most restaurants, not just this town, but a lot of towns, everybody shows up with 1 car. So if you have a table for 4, basically you need 4 parking spots in today's world. Not too many people. Some people travel together and go to the restaurants, but a lot of people go singly. You find that at lunchtime a lot, where they meet for meetings and so on and so forth. So the parking that we have in there may not even maybe allow for enough parking if we go off of people's habits today. So we really need the parking there. The lighting, I don't want to overlight the parking lot, but I also know that we need to keep it safe for security. There's employees that are going to be using the back parking lot, and they'll be leaving after work at nighttime, and they need to travel to their vehicle somewhat safely, or at least have enough light to be able to see the keys in their hand to put them in the door. We're not asking for floodlights, we're asking for soft lights. I don't like lighting myself, a lot of it, and this is all directly down lighting. The wash light you see going out is just a reflector that goes out. So it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it drifts out away from the light post. I'm one of the original people who actually wrote the lighting codes for the town of Woodside, all right, when I sat on the Architectural Site Review Board a long time ago. So the idea behind the lighting, where we're going today, even today's standards, we don't want to see the source of the light. That was the biggest thing. So we managed to stop a lot of floodlights that happen in people's homes and uplighting to the trees that cast off nothing but just a couple glimpses into a tree. So the idea behind what we're doing is we ask people to downlight, put the light down. So if we go to a 5-foot light or a 4-foot light in here, there's no protection for the light stands at all. The way that parking lot is set, it's all open. So there couldn't be any lighting at all. Or if we did put it in, it'd get run over. Somebody'd back into it, sideswipe it. It would just be a mess. So it's kind of not practical to do it the way staff said they should do it. And if you do go outside and look at their lighting, first light you're going to see when you go out the door, look at the bench, look up, and you'll see a light fixture there that's 12 feet off the ground. So even the town has light fixtures like that. So anyway, if there are any questions?
Richard, you can lead off again.
Thinking. I agree about the lights, saying. Do you have any say regarding more landscaping or additional trees around the retaining wall?
Oh, we are, if you look at the plan, there's planting that's going to be on the retaining wall around it. It's a vine. I'm adding to it to soften the looks of the rock walls. And if you want to know the reason why that wall was designed like that, sound. So if you take a gabion basket wall and throw sound at it, it doesn't reflect. If you have a concrete wall, a wood wall, it will reflect the sound back at you, and it would go all through the neighborhood. It'd go through Woodside. You can hear a horn honk 10 miles away. So with the gabion baskets, it reduces, it just absorbs the sound and doesn't reflect it. That's why they were there. And to disguise them a little bit, I've added in what they call creeping fig, and they'll take over the wall, and it'll make it very subtle. But there's low planting for that. I am taking some of the healthiest trees I can in the oaks and moving them around the property back inside there, so we don't destroy all the trees. We're trying to save them.
And you have experience in transplanting and they take?
Yeah, been a landscaper for, building a landscape for 50 years. And I've moved trees that are over 50 feet in height with girths on them this big in town. So easy. Just takes a lot of time and money.
Thank you.
Commissioner Appel online.
Oh, hey there. Hope you can all hear me again. Thank you very much for proactively answering some of the questions I raised with staff about the retaining wall. I only have a few follow-ups. I guess my main question is, the first presenter noted that the application is designed to address the parking deficit. And if that's the case, then can you explain to me and to the commission and to the town folk in attendance, how does it make any sense to simultaneously allow for more seats in the restaurant? In other words, if we're trying to make up for a deficit, adding more seats, wouldn't that theoretically just create the same problem all over again? Can you help us understand the logic there?
Well, if you go back and think about it, we were behind on parking as it was. And during COVID, you guys have asked that we add outdoor seating in the front and parklets and also fix the parking. So it's pretty simple. What I have done is added enough parking spots to cover the additional outdoor parklets, as well as fix the uptick what we needed on parking for the existing as it sits today. So if we don't put the parklets in, we still need to add more parking just to make the center compliant today. So the CUPs that have been written in the past, you've kept the same seating for everybody when the owners changed, but nobody went out and counted the parking spaces. All right. It's always been shy of parking. Pretty simple. I
No,
had an
but
office
it's not,
space.
but it's, I don't want to make it totally adversarial, but it's not simple, because as I read the application, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. As I read the application, the numbers of permitted seats are also going up. So wouldn't it make sense that if the numbers of permitted seats stayed where they were in the original CUP, that deficit would have a much better chance of being reduced? I don't understand the logic. Maybe I can't count, or maybe I just don't understand parking lot mechanics, but it seems pretty clear that if you're asking for more seats, you're essentially saying the parking spots are not going to be adequate anyway. So then somebody could say, well, why bother to put in any parking spots if we're just making the problem worse and worse and worse by adding more seats? So I'm trying to understand very clearly why the application also has an increase in the permitted seats. If you're just trying to make up the application, make up the deficit, then it should be the same amount of seats as has always been permitted. Whether we counted them correctly or not is not the issue. Am I making sense, or am I just not understanding the issue?
Yeah, no, thanks. This is Lee Prince. You are making sense. I think the answer here is there are seats being added for the parklets, but absent adding seats for the parklets, there would be no reason to make all these changes. The CUPs that exist allow the seating that is there now, and they run with the land, and there's no requirement that there be additional parking. It was specifically, the town was aware that there were fewer parking spaces and decided to approve the CUP with the parking that's there now. So absent approving an additional number of seats, there's really no reason for the applicant to go through this process.
I'm sorry, I'm totally confused now. Can you, I'm sorry, I really,
Can I maybe?
it just seems really,
maybe a
it seems
reframe of this
straightforward to me.
question
If
would-
there's, wait, let me
Can I,
finish.
Matt, can I take a stab at reframing the question in a way that might clarify it? Because I think it, with the,
Next, you're up next.
okay,
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Oh, no, I would gladly cede my time to the other Matt, who perhaps can
Okay.
get us to shed some light on how the numbers of seats have to go up as well.
But I think what I heard earlier, maybe I'll confirm this, is that the math nets out with the increase in parklets plus the increase in parking. There's a set within new tranche of parking, there's a set that eliminates the non-compliance, and then there's a set that accounts for the new parkings.
Correct.
And hence, we're compliant yet maxed out once we have the parklets plus the total number of new spots, which half of them are due to non-compliance and half of them are due to net new seating. Is that correct?
Yes. To a certain point, yeah. All right, so we're trying to be compliant, all right?
Yeah.
So the minute we touch something, our wonderful town staff says, we want you to add, we need you to fix. So during this process, I have. and
So wait,
it's not just-
town staff, sorry to interrupt, is this now a town staff's fault?
No, it's not a
I'm
fault of
confused. If
anybody.
you want more
This is-
parking,
No, this is a thing that everybody goes through. Once you touch it, you fix it. So if it's not to today's standards, you're updating to everything to today's standards, including the fire standards. We had more parking in there as well. What is existing today, the fire department is making me eliminate. So we are losing parking as well as adding parking. If I can, if that.
And maybe to,
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. We're,
and maybe
yeah,
to
we're
clarify
formalizing
that-
outdoor dining as well as fixing everything today. I mean, I don't know how to explain it any more than, it's so simple in my brain, but
yeah, maybe I think one point of clarification here is like the reason we came here wasn't just to resolve a parking non-compliance. It was due to a desire from the applicant to formalize the outdoor dining pursuant with the, folks are on either side of Measure A, but the side of
Right.
Measure A that was interested in making outdoor dining permanent.
we're legalizing your outdoor dining that you want now is what we're doing.
And
Okay?
then Richard,
Yeah.
I mean, speaking to you remotely, I think implicit in the interpretation of many people of Measure A is that by authorizing the outdoor dining, that was in addition to whatever existed indoors, although that wasn't necessarily explicitly stated one way or the other in the measure.
That's correct. It talked about outdoor dining and the expansion of the parking area.
So one final question, which is sort of the question I asked of Sage earlier on the size of the outdoor parklets. I know the trajectory had been, initially the informal parklets were larger. They were reduced at one point. The pizza oven was removed. The
Right.
Airstream went away. Just any comments around the sort of final size of the parklets? Maybe just for all of us to understand, how are they relative to the present day size of the parklets? And then
Okay.
B, how did we land on that?
All right, so we're getting this a little bit more. All right, so the size of the parklets, if you make them bigger, it adds more seating capable. So once you do that, then the parking lot has to get bigger. So I designed the parking lot up to a certain point size where we can go with it, okay? And that said, you can't have any more than this. So something had to give. I reduced the size of the parklets. So the parklets take up 3 parking spaces in front of each restaurant. And in between them, I added bicycle parking too. So there's another one that you should look at too. It's not being brought up is there's a lot of bike parking now. So you can talk in the CUPs about to the restaurants, what they're allowed for bike parking and what does that do to the seating count? Okay. But that's not in this application. We're just trying to put the parklets in, add the parking, make things correct and try to make everybody happy during this process, which doesn't seem to be easy.
and also add seating capacity that's going to kick the problem down the road. That's how I interpret that application.
This is
and I haven't
not
heard-
kicking a
I
problem
haven't
down the
heard-
road. So,
I haven't heard an answer that makes sense to me. I can count. And
Okay.
it seems to me that just basic math, adding more seats when you're trying to play catch up will mean more parking.
I think the
That's-
applicant's intent
you still have
was-
not explained, you still have not explained to me, maybe I'm just a creative person and don't understand the nuances, but it seems like adding more seats just that doesn't solve the problem. It makes the problem worse.
And just to clarify, there's a couple things. Seats are being added for the parklets. They require more parking spaces. There's also more parking spaces being added to make the existing non-conforming situation go away to make it conforming. So currently, the parking lot does not supply enough parking spaces for the existing uses and the existing seat counts out there.
That's exactly, so thank you, Sage. That's exactly my point. So wouldn't you logically think that if we have a finite amount of space for parking, that we would actually have fewer seats in the restaurant so that we wouldn't then have the exact same problem a year or two from now, or the
This-
minute this opens
yeah,
up? It's
but this-
counterintuitive. Well, it's counterintuitive, what you're suggesting.
The parking lot now would meet code requirements for all parking, for all uses on site. Whereas currently that's not being met.
I think the core piece here is, as the applicant stated, the reason they're here was because of a desire to expand to expand outdoor dining, right? Not because they came here because they got excited about resolving a nonconformance that they didn't need to resolve, because unless there's a change made, right, they're not forced to resolve the noncompliance. But the reason there's a expanded seating proposed is because of the desire to have outdoor dining, right? So, and a condition of that is that they needed to resolve the nonconformance at the same time.
And then, Richard, we can reserve aspects of this for the commissioner discussion portion. I mean, do you have more questions for Dave?
I have a couple more, yeah, actually.
Go for it.
Would you be willing to accept specific tree sizes, heights, and depth for better concealment for your neighbors?
Can you say that again? It broke up.
Sorry about that. Again, I do apologize profusely for being remote. Would you be willing to accept specific requirements for tree sizes, heights, and tree trunks to provide better concealment for your neighbors and for the town, as opposed to a plan that's like, we'll work with the town, which is what I presently read as the plan?
Okay, so the biologist, if we go into the creek setback area, I have to have a biologist call that out. I can't just call out plants or sizes or anything. It has to be done by a biologist or approved by a biologist. So I have to work with staff and a biologist for the planting that would go in that area. We're
Okay,
willing
and do
to
you
do
think
it.
it's at all problematic for, you're willing to do it, but the point is you haven't done it. And so you're putting, at least for I'm speaking for myself, it's very hard to say yes to all of these changes when there's no specificity as to what is actually going to be put into place, as opposed to like a design review, which is by definition conceptual. Okay, so I'm glad you're open to it, but it
I
makes
do
it very
have-
difficult to
I
make
do have a
decisions.
couple trees called out on the plans, as well as moving several trees on the plans. So, and
Okay, those are my questions. Those are my questions. Thank you.
all right. Any other questions?
Okay, Matt, Matt Gar, did you have further questions?
No.
And so Dave, are you the person to speak to on behalf of the applicant with regard to the CUPs?
Me and your lawyer, yes.
Okay, and so your tenants have reviewed these CUPs for the two restaurants,
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
and you and your client, in the context of their landlord and tenant relationship, you are okay with this being part of the submission package?
Yes, the owner's here if you want to direct.
It
Sure.
depends on whether
Yeah.
they want to speak or
Yeah.
not.
You want to speak, Kristen? Upon the agreement between you for the CUPs and the restaurants.
Well, if they want to work, they'll have to agree to it. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I guess the only specific question I had was on the staff report. On page 6 of the CUP for the Village Bakery, item G, it said that there will be no temporary or permanent roof on the rear patio area. And that seems to be pretty unambiguous to me.
I'm fine with that. I can't remember how long ago that the approval of that, I don't know, it's kind of a temporary cover on the back patio of the bakery. Is that what you're talking about?
All right.
I did sign a permit for that, and I remember that one of the conditions was that that did have to come on and off for periods of time throughout the year. Gosh, with COVID being 4 years, that was,
All right,
I
that's
would
fine.
say
I'm
6
just
or
saying
7
that-
years ago.
Right.
But
I
I'm
mean, just
fine
tr-
if he takes it off.
Mm.
That's fine with me.
I mean, that is one of the requirements in the
I
CUP.
can clarify, there was always a restriction on covering the back patio
Mhm.
under the CUP. And it was approved under the temporary measure for COVID. And so to have a permanent cover there, you start to get in building coverage issues. And so what's happened in other properties such as Alice's or the Mountain Winery or Mountain Winery, yes.
Mountain Terrace.
Mountain Terrace, thank you. I get this confused. They both have amended their CUPs to do seasonal covering of areas. And so that's what this condition is here to relate. If the owner of the business or the property owner wants to come in and amend this to do seasonal seating, that would be part of a CUP amendment. Everything that was approved for that back was part of the temporary CUP for COVID.
All right, but the way that it's written right now, it comes off and stays off.
That's correct. There's been no proposal
All right.
to keep it as permanent.
Because it was temporary, it was supposed to have been temporary,
That's
Right.
fine with me.
so,
That was the only question that I had.
okay. Great. Not gonna run away, see if you have any more questions.
I think with the end of commissioner questions for the applicant, we are ready to open this for public comment. And I assume we have a number of people online that would like to comment as well as here live in the room. And so let's start with 2 people in the room and then start taking Zoom calls as well. So you're up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Van Jepson. Thank you for the Plan Commission. Thanks to Dave for his decades of work in town. My name is Van Jepson. I've lived on La Cuesta Way for over 30 years. So good evening, neighbors. Good to see you all here. I've seen a lot of parking expansions come and go, and this one should go, like the others have. And I have 2 solutions for it. And the thinking around the solutions is there's this, and I'm against the.
Is that mic turned on?
Can you hear me? Squeeze the red handle,
Squeeze
bring
the
it up.
right handle, raise it and speak
Okay.
into the mic. Oh,
Should I
that's
start
excellent.
over? There,
Perfect.
that
Yep,
better?
Yep.
Okay, Van Jepson here, 31 years on La Cuesta Way in Woodside. Good evening, neighbors. Good evening, Planning Commission. And Dave Tanner for his good decades of work. I'm against the expansion of the parking area for several reasons. I'm against the change of the equestrian easements, walkway easements, open space easements, changes to foliage of trees, anything like that. I want to keep the current rural feel of Woodside the same. And I have 2 solutions. And follow me with this one. If we all walked to Bucks or the bakery, we wouldn't need parking. If we all rode bicycles to Woodside Bakery or Bucks, we wouldn't need much parking. If we rode horses, we may need some of the parking. But if we drive cars, we need parking. And so it's not necessarily that we don't have enough seats in the restaurants. It's that we don't have enough parking spaces because people don't carpool. And so my first proposal is find a way to have the people who come to the bakery and Bucks have incentives to do parking incentives. So leave the other nice little small businesses there with their identified parking like you do at Robert's Hardware. They have their identified parking. All of them should have identified parking except for the 2 restaurants. They're the big culprits here. And so what my proposal is have an incentive for them to have more than 2.5 people or 1 person per car, as Dave said, get to their restaurants. And how you do that is you charge them money. You put parking, those little, give me a tag, put up the bars in the back, let them go through, to the parking. And then if Bucks or the bakery wants to give them a voucher or qualify their parking, they can make it $20 or something like that. And then they can have an incentive for them to say, oh, you brought 2 people in, 3 people in, carpooled. Let's let them give them a voucher for that parking. So that's the first proposal. That's a little more of a softer proposal. The harder proposal is, since those are the 2 culprits, eliminate one. Give it a vote to the town. Take out the bakery or take out Bucks and just say, hey, the problem is, do you want to have lunch or do you want overpopulation of cars in the town center? That's the choice. It's a little harder choice. So I'm saying no to the expansion of the parking with 2 solutions. One, charge for parking for the restaurants, dedicate the parking to the other small businesses there like they do at Robert's Hardware. And if that doesn't work, they don't want to accept that, then eliminate one of the restaurants. Thank you.
And then we have a number of speakers that want to speak tonight, and we want to give everyone a fair chance. So could we be running a timer on our speakers? And is the norm for that 2 or 3 minutes? 3? Right.
Marilyn Volke, 55 Roan Place, former planning commissioner. And I'll try to get it all done in 3 minutes, but not much, because I'm only here to talk about one issue, and that's my recollection of the conditional use permit hearings for both the Woodside Village Bakery and then a couple of years later, its successor, the Village Bakery. Speak up? Oh,
Yep.
yeah, okay. I'm always complaining about it and I'm not doing it. Anyway, for those of you who couldn't hear, I just wanted to share my recollections because I was on the planning commission for the conditional use permit hearings with Woodside Village Bakery and then shortly thereafter with the Village Bakery that followed it. The Woodside Village Bakery came before us because it was a code enforcement and the conditional use permit was called up because the owners made additions to the patio outdoor dining area without a permit and ran afoul of the town. I don't remember every single thing about that, but it had to do with the building of those walls and other improvements in an attempt to cover it. And after resolving some of those issues with the building department, then they came before us. He came before us, Mark Swire, who was then the voice and face of the Woodside Village Bakery. And so it was affirmed very firmly that, it was 70 seats inside, 25 outside on the patio. That's how it got to 95 seats. And there was a mechanism that he proposed to make sure that he hit those daytime numbers and nighttime numbers. But the seating was always 70 inside, that was the building, and 25 outside. So with the turnover of the business to the Village Bakery, again, they came back for a conditional use permit hearing or 2. And again, it was the seating didn't change because the building changed some, but they added that bakery alcove. So the restaurant is still 70 inside, 25 outside with the same requirements for daytime and nighttime use. It appears that that has been violated. It seems like that there's evidence that seating restriction has been violated for a number of years. I didn't walk through the restaurant. It's not my job anymore, but I did walk by the outside today because I was in the parking lot. And from my count, man, I can't believe that I get nervous when I'm talking to you on this side of the microphone. But I do. My casual count was 60 seats in that outside patio. So I get confused in this current proposal with the numbers, because if they already have 70 inside and 60 or 50 outside, they have as many seats as is being proposed, and the resolution might just be let them have the 50 seats outside, which is double what they were permitted, and forget the parklet.
All right. Thank you,
And
Marilyn.
And I do think that you should bring them in to talk to them about the conditional use compliance.
All right, one more live standing in line, and then we'll try someone online.
Hi, I'm Don Pugh. I'm a 50-year resident of Woodside, and I've been fighting to save rural Woodside for all of those years. I want to first thank the Planning Commission for really doing a great job of protecting our environment and preserving the beauty of Woodside. But this project should be called the Restaurant Expansion Project, which, Matt, you are right on. This is an expansion of the restaurants, which is incredible, wrong. In 2016, the Planning Commission spent many, many meetings developing the CUP for Kenyatta Corners and the library and the bakery. You carefully reviewed seating capacity parking limits and came up to 70 seats in the day, 95 at night. And the owner of the bakery agreed, I'll make a fine financial return. This worked fine for several years before COVID hit. Well, when COVID hit, bam, everything went all asunder. But it's a tribute to the excellent work the Planning Commission did. In the last 2 years, when the seating limit should have been obeyed, the bakery has consistently ignored the rules, and everyone agrees that they've been violating the rule. I counted 172 seats, a little bit more than 70. And my question, which I think would like to hear again, is Sage, why did the staff never count the number of seats for the last couple of years?
Please direct your comments, Don, to the commission.
Well, this is a question that staff has failed to count them. I don't know why. It has been this continuing violation. And the problem is the excess parking is being caused by the excess seating available. It's like if you take 1 gallon of water and try to pour it into a half-gallon can, what happens? It overflows. Well, that's exactly what's happening today. This violation of the seating limits is causing the problems. And the applicant says, well, the town and the owner never enforced any of this, which is kind of ridiculous. How could they show such disrespect to the Planning Commission? You guys spent a lot of time back in 2016 figuring out what is a reasonable set of things to consider. You know, those excess 102 seats, assuming $30 a day per seat in the last year and a half, has generated over $1 million of revenue to the bakery. Now we're talking about some money. So let's talk about the findings which you are required to create for the CUP, the variance, and abandoning the open space. And those findings, there's no way in hell you can make the findings, which are necessary, essential. There would be no parking lots if the seating limits were obeyed. So the project is really not necessary. Community well-being, well, detract from the well-being of the community, bulldozing a beautiful forest and ruin the trails for a parking lot. It's a violation of the general plan. It says the general plan, day-to-day uses of local residents. However, a recent survey revealed that only 5% of the people in the bakery are local residents. Should we become a tourist destination? It's grants of special privileges. Does anyone realize the plan is really to allow the expansion of the bakery? That's a fundamental issue. Variances. The hardship is of the applicant's making.
Okay, Don, you're running over time here.
Okay, then the last thing, a solution. Let's put this project on hold. Let's require the bakery to follow the rules. Let's measure the parking issues after that is legal, and then work on the town center project.
Okay, Don, let's please move on and give someone else online a chance to speak.
And I do support the trails. We do need to have a trail of all kinds for all the different users.
Don, we appreciate your comments. Do we have someone online?
We have one raised hand online, Tori Patterson.
Oh, let's go for it.
Mute. Thanks for hearing me out online. I am the neighbor closest to Bucks. I live across the creek. And just a few points. I'm not the most affected by this project. I'm probably the second most. Obviously, my neighbor up the creek is. First off, I just want to give thanks to everyone who's thinking through this issue hard. Secondly, I'd love to thank Tyler and Rowan, who are the owner-operators of Bucks. They're incredibly responsive to the neighbors and fabulous stewards of Woodside culture. And if a ball can bounce their way on seat counts or anything else, I hope it does. They've been an incredibly good neighbor. 2 suggestions on the design. One, has anyone thought about the circulation of the drop-off trucks that arrive between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. every morning and make an unbelievable amount of noise? If those dropped off goods on the other side of the tennis shop or by the hardware store as opposed to next to the creek, it would have a profound positive impact on those of us who are along that creek. And I think it should be, not an impossible design element to think through circulation of those vehicles and unloading of those vehicles on the other side of the building. Second issue, there's an enormous amount of trash from people having parties in that parking lot that gets thrown into the creek. That's going to double or more. And so I'm wondering if there can be some design element. I certainly like the idea of a wall or some other, maybe a fund that required the landlord or the owners to clean up the creek once a month, but something to keep the thousands of beer cans out of that creek. As an environmentalist and a neighbor and a resident, it's just obnoxious. And so if we're going to expand the parking lot, we're going to expand the nighttime party zone. And I get it, we got to do something on parking, but that's an issue that's of a lot of concern to me and those of us who care about Dry Creek. So that's it.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go live in the room since we have someone standing waiting for the microphone, and then we'll go to Zoom afterwards if you can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maytal Malka. I'm currently a freshman in high school, after attending Woodside Elementary. The other night, I was returning home from my friend's house at around 9:45 p.m. The second me and my friend entered the Bucks rear parking lot, we were greeted with two cars with tinted windows. The second they saw us, they left their parking space and began circling me and my friend. At this moment, our instincts kicked in, as well as our adrenaline, and we ran home with 911 on our speed dial. No kid should have to go through any scary experiences in a place that is deemed safe, and one as simple as a parking lot. Extending the parking lot would endanger the safety of kids. Unfortunately, this is not the only time my safety has been at risk in the parking lot. It's not only happened at night, but also in the broad daylight, and I'm not the only one this has happened to. My peers' safety has also been on the line when doing simple actions like walking to school or going home. So as I end my speech, imagine you had a child, or if you have one, what would you do? Would you vote to extend the parking lot, which would further endanger your child's life? I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have,
Right, well, do we have someone online?
yes, Darren Evans.
You're on, Darren.
I just want to put a quick support for the changes and expansion of the restaurants. I think it's sort of a central gathering place for many of us who enjoy Bucks, enjoy the bakery. I get that people don't want people from out of town, but we're kind of in a community that's just bigger than Woodside, and so we kind of have to think about 20 years on the track. We're not going to be a town of 5,000. So if we get one chance to make a change, we should do it, and then just appreciate that everyone's got to change over time. Thanks. That's all.
We appreciate your comments and your brevity. Going back to the room.
Hi, thank you. Peter Bailey. I want to speak in support of the proposal, but had a couple of comments and a question. One, I think safety is a huge issue, and we need to have a safe parking lot that's well lit and all that, so that we, as described by the young lady, that never happens. So safety's got to be at the forefront. I'm also very empathetic to the neighbors. Anything to do with screening, to also block lights or anything else, I think is really important. Last, as one of the folks who helped support Safe Routes to School for many years on the school board and otherwise, really important we continue to have a great path for the kids and the horses, and separating them or whatever I think is really critical to support all the needs of the community. My only question is, and this is for Eugene, it's been a while, hi. What is the impact of the vote upon some of the findings that were mentioned earlier tonight in terms of, does the vote matter in the context of reclaiming open space and things like that, which I think are part of the findings we're asking the Planning Commission to find? Thank you.
And just for reference, the public comments are directed towards the commission, and then we can ask staff to elaborate on those questions. So I will just turn it over to Jean and let her reply to that.
So Measure A changed the zoning on the rear parcel, so you have a voter approved zoning initiative. So that's why you see in front of you the general plan conformance and the change to the zoning. And the zoning will be commercial and parking isn't allowed use on that site then.
And so it lifted the Measure J restrictions from 1979, but then required that the specific proposal go through all of the usual development hoops, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's go with the next person live in the room.
Hi, thank you. I'm Rob Solomon. I'm a big fat no on this as proposed. I think Dave Tanner did a wonderful job proposing a site plan for a big town like Brentwood or Larkspur, where they have the country marts, or Menlo Park. It doesn't fit the town plan. If you read your plan in very specific language, you guys are here to maintain the rural residential character of the community and preserve its natural beauty and tranquility. That ain't a tranquil plan at all. It's concrete, it's lights, it's more people. It's very anti-Woodside. And the other principle of the plan is to preserve, maintain, and enhance Woodside as a small and unique rural town. We are a small and unique rural town. And this kind of messes that up. I think as a planning commission, you really have to think about your charter and how this plan affects that charter. It's a big, it's antithetical to, I think, what you are supposed to be here for. So very important to consider. I also think there's a big fat math problem here. I think that parklets are wonderful and we should have them. And parking's a little bit of a problem, but the bakery is cheating. They have their outdoor patio that isn't, it has a roof that's not supposed to be there, and they don't really need their parklet. So keep Buck's parklet. Have this wonderful outdoor stuff, but you guys are cheating, or somebody's cheating with this Measure A. You know, parklets, parking good, community gathering good, but this is a big fat fuck you to Woodside. That's what it is, and we shouldn't do that. Thank you.
All right, we'll just let that ride. Let's take someone from the Zoom room, and please, let's try and keep it civil. I know people have very different opinions on this, but we can always be civil. Okay,
There are currently no raised hands online.
right, you're up then.
Hi, my name's Andrea Bunt. I have 4 children aged 2 to 12. We use the open space every day and we love it. We also, love Bucks. My 9-year-old says that he loves Bucks more than he loves Disneyland and wants to have his wedding reception there. And so I want to leave Woodside in a casket, and I hope that Bucks is there until the day I die. So so that said, my biggest issue, aside from losing this wonderful open space that my children use, I walk them down, they walk themselves down, and it's not just in the morning and the afternoon. It's, I'm coming back at 11 with a preschool, or I'm going back, it's all throughout the day that open space is being utilized by families. My bigger concern, which is, I feel like, so the Roberts are spending a tremendous amount of money to build out this parking space. And, when I see this parking space being built out, the first thing that comes to my mind when I see that someone's spending so much money is like, what's the ROI here for the Roberts family? Building this out is probably close to $1 million to build out a parking lot. There's got to be some big ROI for them. And so then you realize, oh, well, it's getting rezoned, correct, as commercial. So it's going from residential to commercial. And that then in turn opens up the ability to build out a bunch more commercial space. According to the code, if I read the code correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's 20% of 20% of the area can be built out as commercial space. So that's a 70,000 square foot lot. That means that by changing the zoning, you are in fact allowing 14,000 additional square feet of retail, office, commercial space in this area. So if you approve this, and I'm not saying the Roberts family is going to go around and, decide to sell tomorrow, but say they do decide to sell tomorrow, you're gonna have a developer come in and say, why would I keep this building? I can have a building that's 14,000 square feet larger. Let's, tear it all down, start afresh, and who knows where we go. So that's my biggest concern. I feel like no one's really talked about it. And I think it really needs to be considered, maybe it doesn't happen tomorrow, maybe it happens in 10 years, maybe it happens in 40 years, but by changing the zoning, you're enabling that to happen at some point in the future. And I don't think in Measure A, the voters are aware that that's really what was on the table here. And, maybe people want a ton more development in downtown Woodside. I'm not here to say one way or the other, maybe people want shops. But that's needs to be part of the conversation. Thanks.
Clarification for Sage on that, which is, my understanding is the zoning was a Measure A decision. Planning Commission is making no zoning decisions. Is that correct?
That's right. And the rezoning through Measure A was just to put a parking lot on that rear parcel. Its commercial use is limited to that.
And Sage, could you please comment on the potential for adding additional retail space on that location?
Commercial zoning is allowed for 20% building coverage. And so the site is very close to 20% already, if you include the entire site, but that's what the code allows for, 20% maximum building coverage.
And the site right now, as part of this.
And sorry to interrupt, if you expand buildings, you expand uses, therefore expand the need for parking. So again, it's a push and a pull. It's not as simple as just adding more square footage.
Right, that was exactly my follow-up question, so you forestalled me. Okay. Okay, do we have another speaker in the room that wants to step up?
Hi, thank you, Kim Hansen, and I agree with Andrea's comments and wanted to piggyback on that. Because my speed reading of the massive packet has led me to want to ask you about and talk about the abandonment of the open space easement seems to be inconsistent with the Chapter 6.6 Open Space Easement Act of 1974, as well as the rezoning of parcel number 350 from residential to commercial. Also leads me with some questions from the staff report about the lack of demonstration that provision 4 of this government code 51093A open space abandonment, which states that the abandonment is necessary to avoid a substantial financial hardship to the landowner, not the tenants, due to involuntary factors unique to him. And I'm sorry, I sped read it, but from what I understand, to move forward with these changes, we have to meet these 4 provisions. So as I understand it, the landholder, Roberts Trust, financial situation is tied to rents that they receive from the businesses on this land, as well as Robert's hardware business. So are the rental amounts in the form of a lease? Do all these businesses have leases? Are the leases and the money to the landowner tied to any productivity or performance measures? Or are these businesses here month to month? Or does the landowner receive the same amount of monthly income regardless of the volume and monetary gain from business that's performed and the number of cars that park here? Is this information public? Has it been shared? And has it been considered in the consideration of the project? So I ask you, what is the unique financial hardship that the landowner is avoiding due to involuntary factors by open space easement abandonment? There's absolutely a financial gain to the landholder in the rezoning of this residential zoned land to commercial. And the abandonment of open space land does also have a monetary gain to the landholder and a loss to the easement holder. Will Woodside Town be paid for the easement if abandonment is warranted and proven? So here's some rough math, very rough math, sorry. So changing the zoning from residential to commercial, let's use round numbers. I'm not an appraiser. So the size of the parcel is 2.21 acres. Say for residential, it's estimated at 5 million per acre. Your value is 11 million, but commercial land value is generally much higher. So let's just use double that. Let's call it 10 million per acre. So your value is $22 million. If the open space easement is abandoned after the zoning change, the value of the easement doubles. And the calculation in chapter 6.6 yields a payment to the town, the easement holder, of approximately $1 million, or after the abandonment, it's 2.75 million. How does this factor into the project? So it's possible this isn't about ensuring you have a place to park to get a yummy meal. It's about money to the landholder and maybe the town. Thank you.
Right. Jean, would you like to make any comment on any of these points?
The only point I'll make is that in the resolution itself, the findings are called out for you. The applicant has given you their rationalization for why each of those findings can be made. You're asked to take a look at those, and the council will ultimately have to make those findings if indeed the open space easement is modified in size.
Thank you. All right, next person in the room, please.
Yes, I'm Kathy Francison and a longtime neighbor here. For those of us who live within earshot of these restaurants, having more outdoor seating does in fact affect the neighborhood. The restaurants bring a lot of traffic. They bring a lot of congestion and noise. If you're within earshot of this, I think one other neighbor mentioned hearing dumpsters being pulled at whatever hour of the morning, maybe around 4 a.m., maybe around 3. There's delivery trucks coming and going. There's a lot of activity associated with all of this. It does affect the neighborhood. I'm sure the customers enjoy it. We all enjoy sitting outside at restaurants, but this is the impact to the neighborhood. So that is my concern. When I look at the bakery, very nice restaurant, but you already have outdoor seating, and that seems like that should be sufficient. I also agree with the suggestion that having perhaps a small amount of outdoor seating for Bucks might make some sense. But again, for me, the math also doesn't quite add up when you want to expand outdoor seating at the same time you're saying you're having parking problems when that outdoor seating is going to take up some of the parking. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Is there anyone online at the moment that wants to speak?
Yes, we have two hands. The first is Becky Kleiner.
All right, let's take the Zoom viewers back to back then.
Hi, my name is Becky Kleiner, and I live in 155 Prospect Street, right next door to the proposed project. And today I am standing before you, not just as a next door neighbor necessarily, but as a deeply concerned Woodside resident. This project started with the approval of Measure A, which, let's be honest, passed by only 4 votes. But it passed, okay? So I ask you to think about the plan that you are looking at today, this overdevelopment with its abandonment of usable open space is far beyond what anyone thought they were voting for. It's been said, even by members of different committees of this town, if I knew the project would look like this, I would have voted against Measure A. So I ask, why not subject this new plan to a vote and see how the community really feels? This is a different animal in all shape and form. It has nothing to do with Measure A. Please don't be misled by how this project is being framed. We hear talk of just 30 parking spaces, but that's not the full story. This proposal asks for an expansion of the conditional use permit, a variance, which, let's not forget, is already being violated by the Village Bakery. It calls for a modification of open space, more likely an abandonment as the usable area is being taken, and in reality, it's adding more than 60 parking spaces. This isn't the Measure A that was sold to the community, and I know that many of you didn't envision a project of this magnitude when you supported this initiative. Now, as a neighbor, let me share what it feels like living next to this property today, even before the expansion. Trucks start arriving before 6 a.m., sometimes at 5:30 a.m. And now, since a month ago, we reach a new low, 4:45 a.m. unloading with beeping and shouting, disturbing the sleep of the neighbors, including my family. When we call the town, we are told to call the Roberts. When we call Christina Roberts, we get excuses or silence. It's Taylor from Bucks, really an angel, who helps us by checking his security cameras and confirming the trucks for the village bakery are violating the rules. Yet, still not enforcement. And at night, it's more of the same, but different. Loud voices blasting music from cars in the rear parking lot after the operational hours. And in the morning, after we experience that, if we go to the parking lot, we are greeted by cans and bottles of alcohol as the best scenario. The lack of law enforcement is alarming, and it makes me question how will the town of Woodside will manage even a bigger project. I leave you with
Right.
these reflections. It is.
You're running out of time here.
I know. I
Please.
just asked for 30 more seconds.
Okay,
Is
30 more seconds.
Measure A wants to be? Is this really what our community voted for? Has the town shown it can enforce the current CUP regulations? And lastly, as a direct neighbor, we have been left out of the conversation. There has been zero neighbor consideration. Mr. Tanner claimed he was in constant communication with us, yet we only heard from their lawyer last week after we called out his lie in a meeting. Our concerns were brought to the town, but the response from Ms. Tanner was, we can pay for that all, despite the
Thank you
fact
very
that
much.
issues violate municipal codes.
Thank you. Your comments are definitely heard here. All right, next Zoom person.
Next is Caitlin.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I will try and be super quick. Two things. One, when we all voted on Measure A, I think everyone would talk and say, we need to have outdoor dining at Bucks. Bucks is a family restaurant. Our children live for their milkshakes and it's part of the town. And of course, the parking spots that we need to add are the parking spots that are being taken over by the parklets. I don't think anyone that voted for Measure A appreciated that there would be this many parking spots added. I think we all envisioned that the parking spots that would need to be added were the ones that were literally taken over by the outdoor dining experience. So I think that what was voted for Measure A is a completely different scenario from what is being proposed now. And I think if this proposal now would go to vote, we would absolutely not pass. Measure A would fail miserably if people knew the amount of parking that was being proposed at this instance. Secondly, I beg that the bike, walk, pedestrian path that is currently being used behind the parking lot is kept and maintained. It is for children, it is used between 7:30 in the morning until dusk every night between the multiple dismissal times and kids biking back and forth to soccer practice, basketball, tennis, what have you, Monday through Sunday between games, practices and whatnot. So I'd plead with you that that is kept safe for our children. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, live in the room. We have someone.
My name is Tom Shivington. My wife and I have lived in
You can move
Woodside.
that mic up to make life easier for
Okay.
yourself. Yep. Press the red lever and the whole thing slides up.
I got it. Sorry. Okay.
All good.
I'll
we're
start
trying to
all
make it-
over. I'm going to be brief. Number one, my wife and I have lived in Woodside since 1971. We're definitely opposed to this project, and we have on all that time that we have lived here, we've seen the motto of just keep Woodside rural, and of all that in all that time, this is by far the worst thing that's in that regard has happened. We totally agree with this gentleman here on that. And another factor I think is that it's going to create more traffic, and more parking along Kenyatta Road, which doesn't happen too often, but it happens. If you build more parking spots, more people out of town are going to come, and the biggest percentage that come is out, that use the parking spaces are people from outside, and it's just going to be more of a problem. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And Sage, could you clarify, I believe you talked with Public Works and the casual parking along Kenyatta Road next to Kenyatta Corners is not permitted, right?
We looked at Woodside Road, but so I'm 100% sure Woodside Road is posted with no parking signs. But I also believe Kenyatta Road would probably be the same, as there's a bike lane right against the dirt shoulder.
Thank you. Come on up.
So all the May Day, what do we do about
There
May Day?
could be special event parking granted for different events.
Yeah,
but
that's the only parking for May Day.
But
No one noticed.
Special events are different. 'Cause the Public Works can grant exceptions.
Leave it to the lawyer to mess up the microphone.
It's all good. Go for it.
Good evening. My name is Richard Van Duzer. I'm a partner at Farrell, LeBron and Martel law firm in San Francisco, and I represent Mickey Malka and Becky Kleiner. You heard from Becky just a moment ago remotely. Mickey's here with me today as well. I know this discussion's been all over the map and has covered a lot of issues, and so I want to just try to focus on a few. First, let's talk about the seating. The truth is that the outdoor dining can be added without changing the existing seating limitations in the conditional use permit. Right now, you could add the 9 seats required to add outdoor dining to Village Bakery to the daytime use, and you would still be well within the 95 seating capacity limits that count towards the parking requirement that they have after 7 o'clock at night. The truth is that also that during COVID, as I understand it, Bucks and the Village Bakery were supposed to be trying to monitor the outdoor seating and balance it with their indoor seating so that they didn't exceed those existing seating capacity limits. That still can be done. And the seating limits do not need to be increased in order to allow for the outdoor parking that Measure A proposes. So that's number one. Number two, the abandonment of the open space easement, we lay out in the written product we've given you before the meeting, why we think that will be impossible for the town council ultimately to support in the way of findings. One of your speakers pointed to one of them already. The other obviously is that we don't believe abandoning this open space is consistent with the general plan. And we've cited to a number of different elements of the general plan in our letter, but the proof of that really is, what did the committees that the people here appointed as volunteers do with this proposal? The Trails Committee voted on whether to reject this proposal or not, and they split 4-4. The Open Space Committee voted and unanimously rejected this project. And the Circulation Committee unanimously concluded that it would have an adverse impact upon circulation in the town center. That's what your committees said about whether this comports with the general plan, at least those elements of it that they're responsible for. I think the land use element also very clearly sets forth a standard that this project can't meet. Let me turn to screening. The truth is that every tree that shields my client's property from this new parking area is going to be removed. I can show you the portion of the arborist report that'll show you all of the trees that are going to be removed. There will be no new trees planted in that area. The only trees that are going to be relocated are being relocated to the north of the property. So every tree, and there has to be probably 20, 25 of them, are going to be cut down to provide for this paved parking lot, and absolutely no screenings being provided, which violates the municipal code, which we've cited to in our letter. And then finally, just briefly, on security.
All right.
Just give me a, Well, my
Yes.
guess was,
Yes.
the applicant's attorney
that's
probably
the
spent a
plan
lot
that's-
longer than I did.
Yes.
I'm gonna just wrap up quickly. With respect to security, which is important. We believe that the 5-foot pedestrian grade lighting that's being recommended by staff should be adopted, but it should be adopted in tandem with the gates and the barriers that planning has recommended be put up. So the problems that have been so far confined to the back portion of the existing lot don't move further back, immediately adjacent to our client's property, where you can walk across this creek and enter a gate or break through a gate or climb a fence to get into their backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker in the room, please.
Steve Lubin. I sent you a letter kind of including some of the history about this project. I was a member of, I actually made the motion to approve the CUP in 1979 for this project, which was then a huge expansion and where we obtained the open space easement, which George Roberts did not object to at the time. The existence of the open space easement wasn't at all discussed or made known during Measure A. So I think that would have, is another item that would have changed the outcome. I also want to, point out in my letter, I talked about the last night, the town council approved the request for proposal for the town center plan. It's really a shame this project is moving ahead before the town center plan is done. The parking involves, some of the parking that's in this lot is generated by the hardware store, the employees of the hardware store there. The grocery store park in this lot, and so do some customers. But assuming you are going ahead with this, I think it's important to have the trail, be officially dedicated for all users. We used to have something in town called a multi-purpose safety trail. I think there's an easement with that name behind Gilbert Center that we required there. And that trail should be designed. I think Dave isn't exactly right there. I mean, he's right that as the trail comes off Kenyatta Road, it's quite steep there. It's not, the average grade isn't the issue. It's the steepest grade. And I think that the trail could be designed to have, something like a maximum grade of 5 or 6%. Actually, Caltrans standard for bike lanes is 5% grade. So I think that trail could be designed with curves and grades that were safe for kids to ride on bicycles. And then as far as the layout of the parking lot, I think, that the screening for the neighbors is really an important issue. If the line of parking spaces along the creek were parallel parking rather than head in, you'd gain another 10 feet, you'd get enough room, you'd lose 9 spaces, you'd get enough room to put in some significant screening there. And that could come out of the number of seats that are available to the bakery who have, really flaunted their use permit in the past. And I think they shouldn't be rewarded for that. And finally, the bicycle parking should be in a visible spot in front of the hardware store. There's plenty of room there for that against the fence at the bakery.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Is there anyone online at the moment?
No raised hands.
Okay. We'll do that while the mic.
I've listened to that red button comment enough. Okay, how's that?
Go for it.
Mark Dickey, a longtime member of this community and a resident. My mother served as mayor on all kinds of committees over the years, so I just want to thank all of you and certainly the staff for all the work that goes on. I grew up listening to my mother recount various meetings in minutes, and I will get through in 3 minutes here. So thank you for all that you do. I want to agree with Matt and a variety of other people that have talked about not only the fuzzy math, but the fuzzy process. It's a little unclear what we're solving for here with these additions. The meeting on Monday, we talked about the CUPs. And it's very clear that they are there to do what? And that's a question I have for all of you. I don't necessarily expect you to answer it, but it seems to me that it creates boundaries for how the space is utilized, number of people that are dining, et cetera. And it's abundantly clear, having listened to this, that they're in place to make sure that that happens. And so the CUPs, we either need to enforce them or disband them, because right now they're not being followed. Seems to me that just based upon the numbers we're hearing and people are counting, that those thresholds are being exceeded in a variety of ways. So it seems to me that this process needs a bit of a reboot in terms of what we're solving for. If we're solving for the parklets, that's one thing. But if we're solving for additional growth on top of the parklets, that's quite another. And I think it's very confusing, and it just feels very fuzzy when we get into this detailed dialogue about what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that concise statement. Was there anyone online, Julie?
No raised hands at this moment.
Okay.
Even for me, this is tall. Hi, my name is Mickey Malka. I'm the owner in front of the property that is going to get adjusted to a parking lot. So you heard my wife, you heard Richard speak. I'm not going to repeat some of the things. I'm just going to give you a few other facts for you to consider. Number one, we bought this property in 2021, early 21, and we knew what we were getting in front of us. We checked, we had an open space easement. It was there for perpetually as part of our diligence on our property. And we wake up later knowing that people like outdoor dining. Guess what? I like outdoor dining. I'm a big client of those two restaurants. I go there a lot. We are not against outdoor dining. But I'll tell you how our life is right now. You heard my wife. You heard my daughter. That happened to my daughter walking back to our home. We get the impact of what they are coming and proposing to you. It's maxing out every single inch and every single centimeter, every single space in the restaurant. They're asking for 44 more seats. Why? Why not? It's so easy. Besides managing seats, they're squeezing. They're saying 34 net new parking lots. It's 34, but guess how? They're moving 60 to that lot. So you are my house. You live in my house. You have an open space perpetual easement there, and you wake up with a plan that shows 60 parking spaces. 69 parking spaces and then an open space easement. You hear 15 foot or 12 foot or 10 foot when my house is already 10 foot below that level. All these lights, you hear all the trees that are facing that property completely being removed, and guess what? There's no space to move them, because between the path for the kids and the bikes and the horses, and between maxing out every single inch of the parking space, they are completely taking that over. There's nothing. My backyard will face a 69 parking space garage. Why? Because we're trying to add 44 more seats that we don't need. We don't control that there's 170 right now. Why? Because why not? So and on every one of those topics in the last 4 weeks, first, no one approached us, ever. The first time we faced this was now. So I want you to think about, as a neighbor in your property, you don't hear about anybody, and suddenly you show up this plan. No one called us. No one talked to us. Why don't they like 5 feet altitude? Because they have them today, and they said it's a risk. Well, let's ask a question. How many of those things have been hit by a car in the last 5 years? I guess 0. And why do they like them? Because if they put 5 feet light poles, it means less parking space, because they have to put islands to put them. So they're trying to max out as much as they can. This is not what Woodside is about. Woodside is not about maxing out every single inch. Woodside is about being measured in the ways we do. And Measure A was not about adding 44 to the CUP that no one supervises. It was about open seat dining. So
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to talk as a neighbor in front to be considered, but there's no screen in the plan. The lights are not there, and the safety of my family. And one last thing for you to know, because this is important for the city. The last time there were rains, because of the trash that few neighbors have said fall in the creeks from these people, our property flooded because no one cleaned it, because we are below the other space. It completely flooded. And I can only imagine it's going to get worse with more noise and safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's someone on there.
Press it.
Yeah, that moves it up and down.
Okay. How's that? Good?
If it's good for you, it's good for us.
Okay, good. My name is Pam Roberts, and I've lived in Woodside for 68 years. And this is really hard because Christine is my cousin. But I am completely against this whole development for a lot of reasons. But I'm very supportive of this community and these children that are here and the neighbors that are going to suffer from this development. So as far as the community, I really agreed with the gentleman that was sitting here. And I loved his spicy conversation because it's all true. And this town's been at 5,000 people for as far as long ago as I can remember. And I remember the days when it was almost more horses than people. So, I mean, things do change, obviously, but we fought so hard to remain as rural as we are. And that's what we're trying to do now. I took my kids to school on the pony and dropped them off. It was really cool. And we went through the open space both ways, back and forth. You know, who else gets to do that? Just people in Woodside, maybe Portola Valley, okay? But very few places. So we need to leave this for our kids. We can't have them crossing two different places in front of the shopping center to get to school. We need to leave that open. We can't pave. We can't cut down a whole bunch of trees. It's just, we have to protect our town. And it's against our charter. There's nothing in this plan that is our town charter. Additionally, our neighbors, they're all going to suffer. We happen to live fairly close to town. We hear stuff, but you heard one of the other conversations from the Jepsons about what they hear, the other neighbors that hear the delivery trucks. We really need to get a handle on this and listen and create a good situation for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Alex Tauber. I serve on the Planning Commission, but I recused myself from tonight because I was one of the co-sponsors for Measure A. I just want to remind folks that when Pete, who spoke earlier, and I embarked on Measure A, the town of Woodside General Counsel, the town manager, and the town clerk all verified that any changes to the area we're considering today could only be made via a vote of the citizens of Woodside, as clearly stated by Measure J. Measure J passed by 53% of the votes back in 1988, and I think Measure A passed by a similar margin. I came here prepared to talk about three things. One was the pedestrian trail, but I don't think that's relevant right now. I think you all have a handle on that. I came here to also talk about the 4 tests for lifting the open space easement. Despite the attorney's comments, I just don't think it's relevant. I mean, I can make a case for it. But I think what we heard tonight that is relevant, and I'll stick to my comments to that, is the lady who, Ms. Kleiner, and then the gentleman who spoke earlier who lives there. The only thing that I've seen tonight that is a real issue, and I don't have any dog in this fight. I was one of the co-sponsors of Measure A. The only thing that I've heard that for me is relevant is around screening and noise, especially with regards to the neighbors. So as you consider this, Measure A changed the ordinance so that the parking could be created. When someone gets up here and says that that was never envisioned, that is not the case. That is clearly spelled out in Measure A. Now what we're dealing with is Measure A passed, and now we have what we wanted to have in front of us, but there's an adverse consequence. And to me, it's always interesting. I never met Dave Tanner. I just stepped out with Dave Tanner after Matt Apfelt asked him the question about the trees. And I said, Dave, can't you do anything about screening? And he's like, I can put a wall. I have a 15-foot wide trail. I can do things there. You know, this is exactly what happens when two sides don't talk. They come to the Planning Commission and they hope that it's going to be a binary decision. And my suggestion to you all is we have an issue with screening. We have an issue with noise. And in the absence of two sides not getting together before the Planning Commission and being able to be heard and seeing if there's something constructive to propose, I think you all should, before it gets to the town council, these two sides should come together and see if there's a way to solve the screening issue, if there's a way to solve the noise issue. But for two sides to not get together and expect a binary decision on something like this, to me, I think both sides are taking huge risks. So I'm in favor of this, but I'm also in favor of trying to mitigate some of the adverse consequences that we heard the neighbor of the back, who I think Matt is very concerned about as well. So that's my spiel for tonight. 0 minute.
Thank you, Alex.
It's getting late. I'm Heidi Brown. I live on Kenyatta Road. I've lived here for a while. I wanted to start on a little off tangent, but I just want to thank whoever, I don't know if it's the town or Caltrans, but whoever put that crosswalk with the blinky lights by the Big Fish deserves a round of applause from everybody, because it has made this town so much more safe for the kids to walk to school, bike to school. So thank you. Pass it. If it's not you guys, if you'd pass it on to whoever did that, it's wonderful. I'm glad I came tonight. I've learned a lot. I've heard things that I hadn't really heard before and thought about. It seems like, maybe to follow up on the gentleman before me, I do support more parking in that lot. We need it. And for me, that is also a safety issue. My grandkids ride their bikes through that parking lot, and we ride down with them, and it's been real scary a couple times. So I am a proponent of more parking. But as I sat here today, I've heard a lot of things. It seems there's some abuses that are going on and someone's taking advantage of their situation. Perhaps, I don't know that, but maybe that needs to be looked into. And I respect and I understand the amount of work and time and money that went into getting this plan to where it is. Just not sure it feels like it's quite there yet. The screening, the noise, the safety, could there be some kind of more, some way to find some more parking for everybody's benefit? We too, I'll join the chorus. We are significant supporters of the Bucks restaurant industry, and I love that little parklet. And if there's a way to find that for it to stay, I think that would be a real benefit to this town. And I'll just end with a question. On one slide, I think I saw that 70% of the open space will still be protected in this, and I'd just like a little clarification on that. And if that's the case, I know emotions are running real high around this, but if we could take a deep breath and sort of look better into some of the things that were brought up today, maybe there's a way for everybody to find a little bit of a win. I think that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Next.
Hi there. Oops, excuse me. My name is Rowan McNiven. I'm one of the legacy owners of Bucks. If you haven't heard my name before, it's because my brother has a bigger personality and I let him do all the talking. Love you, brother. I just want to thank you guys. This is so cool. Democracy at work. Here we are. This is the moment where we do get to say what we want. This is why we're here, because we get to say what we want. So I appreciate both sides, and there's some amazing things to consider. And I really hope, and I know that the town is going to consider these things and put forth their best judgment, because you have so far. And I know this is feeling a little divided, and I just want to say that's not what I stand for. I'm all about bringing people together. I'm about this community. I love Woodside so much. Grew up here, even though I live on the hill, I grew up here. I know a lot of people love Woodside. It's getting popular. It's also getting, I think, more populous. From what I've read, I think there's going to be 328 new housing units in the next 7 years. I could be wrong, and I'd love to be corrected if I am wrong. But I think in 2031, we're going to have 328 more units. I know there's 3 spots that are zoned for that. So I think that should also be taken in consideration. And I will welcome all the new residents to Bucks with open arms, and I hope they have a place to park, whether it is the same parking lot or a bigger one. I hope we can all get along. Thank you.
Thank you, Rowan.
Thalia Lubin. I've lived here long enough to remember when there was a dress shop and a dentist and a deli and a bakery. And I consider myself a good friend of George Roberts. Christine knows that. George signed he was my reference for all the committees and boards I've been on. And he kept asking me why I didn't run for council. And I said, because I prefer to be in the peanut gallery. So I think we should all thank Roberts for being there, is my point, because it is the only retail in town. All the other retail along Woodside Road has disappeared. It's all offices. And I'm sure Roberts could rent out that whole thing for offices and make twice the rent. The question is, how do we deal with it? How do we absorb it? And I agree with my husband, Steve Lubin, which I don't always do, that this should be part of a larger project to look at the whole town center. We're not in a rush on this like we were on the housing element. I'm not completely in opposition of this project. I'm, I won't say opposed, but serious concerns about how it's designed. And I think it could be done better. I think with some public input. I do agree, just from my on the street survey, that a lot of people who voted for Measure A didn't understand that it would be of this magnitude. So we can't go back and change that unless we have another vote, but we can change the design and make it more acceptable and still accommodate the needs of the restaurants. I have 2 comments about the walls. I've seen those walls. I'm an architect. The walls are far more preferable than concrete walls, and they do get planted and kind of disappear. As far as the lighting, I think it could be a lot shorter. And I was recently at Woodside High School. They have shielded lights. They are motion activated. And if you're talking about safety, that's the high school. And they seem to work quite well, so that when nobody's around, they go off. They're not on all night. We do have a dark sky policy in town, so I would like Dave, consider that. Anyway, thank you. And you do have a choice tonight. You can continue this item, send it back to the drawing board, or hopefully incorporated in the town center plan so we can look at the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Thalia.
Hi, I'm Vicki Coe. As I prematurely introduced myself a while ago, I've lived here for 40 years, so I'm not a total stranger to Woodside. And all I'd like to say is that just imagine this town without outdoor dining. It has brought so much joy to so many people. It has brought cohesion to this town. It has brought vibrancy. And I think to what would happen to it if this plan doesn't go through? Are they going to be allowed to stay open? Are they going to be given space? And I think our town will be substantially different and it will be poorer for not having it. The issues of security seem like things that can be worked out. If there are that many incidents happening in the parking lot, maybe it needs better patrol. That's an issue to talk to the sheriff's department about, or Woodside Patrol. The lighting, I can understand how it'd be annoying to have a lot of lights, but you need to make it safe. So I think that these are small issues, and I realize that the noise is a problem for people that live directly around it. We get noise in Huddard Park every morning. I mean, we've got trucks rattling through, we have construction going on everywhere. And, everybody has their problems. So I feel sorry for them, and I appreciate how annoying that is, but they're not unique. We get motorcycles up Kings Mountain Road that are incessant. Well, because you live where we do. So I mean, every place has a problem. The concept that Woodside should be just for people in Woodside, personally, I find objectionable. We have a beautiful place. Why would we not want to share it with other people and let them appreciate it the way we do? And lastly, I just think that the Roberts and I think the restaurants were very courageous in doing what they did. And I think to jeopardize that would be a big, big mistake for the town. So.
Thank you, Vicki.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Herzog. Thank you, commissioners, for your time regarding this very important topic tonight. My family came to Woodside because of the rural beauty, the trails, the pastoral quality. It's truly a special place. But I can say with all sincerity that the only thing greater than that beauty is the community. And the community needs places to commune. They need places to get together. And we are so lucky to have this one retail-facing, retail-functioning, community-oriented space in Woodside. We have hundreds of acres of beautiful open space that we enjoy, but just this one neighborhood-serving commercial center. And it's really where we can come together and see friends. We can go to a hardware store, get a cup of coffee. It's a very special component to Woodside, and I sincerely ask you to consider the value that it brings to this community and supporting it. And humbly submit my support for the proposal in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank my fellow neighbors for coming out and voicing their, support and concerns. I think there's been a lot of valid points brought up throughout this evening. Some I was completely unaware of and kind of interested to hear about. I'm very concerned about the security in the parking lot, but more importantly, I think that we're a community. Inside the community, outside the community, we don't exist in a bubble. We don't exist in a bubble. And because we don't exist in a bubble, we're going to have people from outside the community coming here for business. We're going to be coming here for having friends come over. And the parking lot at Bucks it's a bottleneck. It's a constant problem of where to park. You're talking about having even more cars circulate throughout. When people talk about the amount of traffic, the amount of parking that's available now is actually increasing the traffic, not decreasing it, because you've got people filtering in, filtering out, creating pinch points. People are running late. I've seen a number of near misses right outside that parking lot, and it's because they didn't find a place to park. It's a pretty straightforward resolution. The town voted. I'm sort of confused why people think that a parking lot isn't a parking lot. It clearly stated it was going to be a parking lot. This looks like a parking lot to me. I think that there's a very valid concern from the neighbors from a noise and that seems very easy to work through. Gentleman before me said people just need to get together to figure it out. But I think most importantly, like, we voted on this. This has already been decided by the town, and relitigating this again feels wildly inappropriate. I think we need to concern the actual plan to what's to be here, but the debate on whether it should or shouldn't be here has been had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello there. I'm Tyler McNiven, one of the owners of Bucks. I was going to start with a little joke, but I got to say that, Mickey, when your daughter spoke, that really hit me. We need to make sure that that parking lot is safe. And I can make a promise to the town that my brother and I will do everything we can to ensure that our employees are respectful and will not endanger anybody. We are actively working on this now. As far as I know, it isn't our employees that do stick around, but it's something that we will continue to work on as new employees over the years do come in. So very much a big eye-opener for me when I heard that. You know, so we're in the restaurant business, and we are very fortunate because we receive a lot of compliments, and very, very, very rarely we do receive a complaint. I know it's hard to believe, and it's not that we took away our parents' chicken piccata. We really need to bring that back. The number one complaint we do here is that there is a very, very difficult parking situation that's happening, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, we don't go to Bucks anymore because the parking's too hard. We circled for 20 minutes and then we left. It's all the time. I heard a story of somebody almost getting in an altercation because they were fighting over a parking spot. It's a tricky situation out there, and it typically does happen during lunchtime, most days of the week. And I think it's true. It's because a lot of people do come one person per car. And so that's what's particularly aggravating it. Plus all the employees from all the other businesses that are there. I do think that ultimately this is a public good for Woodside. I think that the health and long-term longevity of the businesses there do need to fix the situation that's been around for a very long time. And I can definitely commit to the town and to our neighbors that we will do absolutely everything within our abilities to ensure that we're hearing you when your concerns come up. It's something that we pride ourselves in at all of our establishments, but particularly Bucks, because Bucks is our living room, it's our backyard, it's where we were raised. And so we essentially live there as well. We don't sleep there, not anymore, not since we were kids. But anyway, thanks for your time. Thanks for everything you do. Appreciate it.
Do we have anyone online?
No, there are no raised hands.
Is there anyone else in the room? Oh. Okay, I do not see anyone else in the room. We don't have anyone online. I'm inclined to close the public comment and move on to commissioner discussion. Since no one is stepping up to the mic, the public comment period is closing and we will begin commissioner discussion. I did have one quick question for the town attorney and for Sage. Is there a timeline in play here where the town has to respond to the applicant as far as, does this have, is there any legal reason why this has to be on the town council agenda on the October 22nd meeting?
This is not a permit streamlining project, but the applicant had asked that it be placed on that agenda. It's been noticed for that agenda, and currently that's where it sits.
All right, so we would be making a recommendation and then town council would be taking this up and we could make, and we're making recommendations to town council as to how they treat this.
That's correct.
Okay. Trying to switch it up and not put, or you want to go first? All right, we'll have Richard go first again.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. I had a question to begin. Well, I have several questions, but of our attorney. And the question is, as far as this rezoning and its consequences for, let's say, one of the questions was from the lady in the front, which was sort of answered for me. But certainly, if it is rezoned commercial, then Planning Commission or the City Council would have the right to reject any kind of an application from any other business that would come in, or let's say the owner, to put some commercial buildings or property. In other words, it would only be for the purposes of the parking lot. And there wouldn't be any legal argument from someone that can say, well, this is a commercial property, and potentially take us to court, take the town to court, and prevail.
Measure A was passed by the voters, and it indicated that this would be for surface parking to, in association with outdoor dining at Kenyatta Corners. There is no other permitted use, and in order to change the zoning, because this was adopted by the voters, you would need another initiative measure by the voters. The council could not change that voting, or excuse me, that zoning, because it was voter approved.
So as far as a legal argument from someone, because it's zoned commercial?
It is zoned commercial for the development of surface parking only.
Some other questions or comments. So several times the security issue was raised. I understand that the applicant has answered or responded to questions regarding a gate that would, in my opinion, solve an issue after hours, that it would be troublesome. I think that because of the effect it would have on security, this should be mandatory in our discussions or approval. So that would be a gate that would be closed after hours, and it would open up potentially for trucks in the morning. But during after hours, there would be no permitted cars that would enter or leave. So since I mentioned trucks, there was an issue, a concern from one resident regarding the noise. And there was a suggestion of putting the trucks closer to the hardware store and having some kind of a situation where things could be offloaded potentially there instead of closer to the left side as we were looking at that map, which is the west side. So I would like to potentially have that reviewed, if that's a possibility. And the other big thing is the screening. I don't quite understand why there couldn't be larger trees planted, not just relying on the trees that are being transplanted on the left side and in the rear of the property. It would be more cost, I understand, but if we had a little bit more larger, not necessarily mature trees, but certainly ones that have got a start on a good growth instead of a box tree or something like that. I don't want to take up all the comments from my other commissioners. There was also a question about diagonal, not a question, a comment about the diagonal parking in the proposed parking lot would be more efficient. Now, I can't comment on that. I would like that to be potentially reviewed. I'm sure that the design probably took that into account, so it might be a moot point. That would be all for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Apfel remotely.
I'm
You're
still
up.
here. I'm still here. Thank you. First thing I want to say is for those who don't know me in the room, it's great to see a good crowd of community here to talk about this project. I spent several years in the ASRB and now on the Planning Commission. And if you took a look at my voting record and the process I've used, I've always been strongly in favor of applicants and development. And my default has been if you comply with the guidelines, if you work with your neighbors, if you pay careful attention to screening and mitigation, I'm not going to police the color of your kitchen. And I think my voting record is really clear. And I've been very, very strongly in favor of live and development across town. Second thing I want to say is that I was a strong supporter of Measure A. I supported it because I felt like the town staff and town government were excellent stewards of the community. And I trusted that when that development came to the process, that the town would carefully consider, plan, and do what's right for Woodside as a whole. Well, be careful what you wish for, because I am now one of the stewards of the community. And I have to say that I cannot in good conscience support this variance or this application in any way, shape, or form. It's a hard no for me, and here are the reasons why. First of all, the proposal is way outside the scope and bounds of Measure A. It's not even close. The ballot was about more parking and better aesthetics for the parklets or outdoor dining, as they're called, period. It was never about adding new seats to any of the restaurants or anything like that. I specifically asked that question in my discussions tonight because I wanted to make sure that was entered into the record. So I view the new seats component as a disingenuous attempt to legalize and codify non-compliant behavior. And as a practical matter, adding new seats is going to just drive up more demand. It's a numbers problem. It's not, for me, it's not a safety problem. It's just a sheer numbers problem. You either have more parking, which the town voted for, or you take out seats, but you can't have both. The second reason why I'm opposed to this is the lack of concealment, landscaping, and lighting specifics. I think it's egregious. Every applicant who renovates a property in town is required to submit detailed plans. I went through it twice as an application. There were landscape reports, there were specific tree sizes, there were diagrams, there were plans, plan after plan after plan, and my house is not even visible to anyone in the community. So it's really, really surprising to me, to say the least. This application is bringing one of the most controversial plans in years, one that passed by a handful of votes. And knowing that, the best plan we have is that I'm going to work with the town and we'd be open to it, and just a lot of non-specifics. And I'm actually really shocked to see that lack of specificity in a plan that we know is really controversial, not just for the neighbors, but for everybody in town. And that's related to my final reason for not supporting this measure right now. It's just the process has been uninclusive and opaque, and in my opinion, it's been dismissive as well. We've heard from neighbors direct testimony who were never consulted. We still have a lack of specificity on all of these different components, which are really important, not just to the direct neighbors, but to everybody using that trail and passing by it. And it's just very surprising to me that was something that was not a slam dunk. It's something that was very controversial in the past that I supported, and I'm now sitting here being asked to basically codify new seats in a restaurant that was never contemplated and never part of a plan. So for all these reasons, I'm a hard pass on this. And I would say that just because you can build something doesn't mean you should. The final thing I do want to say is that I would be wildly supportive of a scaled back plan with fewer spots situated away from that creek, if we can do it, with actual specifics on concealment and lighting. That means things like tree sizes, tree placement, what size we're doing, how it's going to look, renderings, all of the stuff that every applicant has to go through in town. I would be wildly supportive of that. And also obviously a cap on seating at the present levels. So I urge the Planning Commission and the Town Council to consider the legal implications of this decision. But for me, it's a hard pass.
Right, you're up, Matt.
All right. So thanks everyone for all the comments, as well as I know a number of folks could not attend as well, and we have a large stack of desk items. And So a few things. One is, obviously there's strong passion on both sides. We saw that in Measure A. We see that as well tonight. And we've also had, folks say that, our job is to uphold the general plan, and it absolutely is. And what is a rural community, right? I think that's also a question before us. Parts of rural communities is also, folks tend to live apart from each other and need those gathering spots. And we see that in rural communities across the board. It's not about a community of hermits. It's not about a community of just bedrooms. It's also important that the town has places to come together. And I think it was well stated that we do see that with Bucks, the Village Bakery. It is a place where folks come together. My kids love going there, right? Because they see their friends, they see them out front, they do the scavenger hunt, they run back and forth in between, they bonk into servers, all that stuff. And so I don't see commerce as being incompatible with the rural community, and that's my interpretation of the general plan. So, for myself, in good conscience, a commercial center that is well scaled to meet the needs of a community is a very strong asset. And the town, voted that was indeed the case with Measure A as well, right? And it was a close vote, and that's been an evolution in time, right? We saw the prevailing wind shift over time from J to A. And so that's sort of one thing, and I do think that's been a huge asset, right? I mean, the kids get together; they're folks that can claim they've lived in Woodside 100% of their lifetimes, and gosh, do they love seeing their friends at Bucks, their teachers. They always run into, Smith Adams, Smith Griffith, et cetera. They all gather there. And to me, that's the fun of living in Woodside, right? Is that. I see that with the bakery. I see that with Bucks as well. When I do look at the stack of papers in front of me, why was I shuffling through those? I was also trying to see, in this room, I think most views have probably been opposed. When I look at this, and I look at the votes, it's been also a different picture. So, I do see quite some support from the community for this as well. And many of these desk items, and I'm not sure if folks have had a chance to look at them, but many of them say, look, parking's been a big issue. We need to resolve it, et cetera. I share some of the concerns raised by my co-commissioners as well, right? I do think things like screening, I do think like things like noise control, I do think things like looking at hours of deliveries, lighting, safety, and security, all those are absolutely important and should be conditions, right? So my recommendation to the town council would be we should absolutely demand more fidelity and specificity around these elements because they're absolutely required, right? And just enumerating them again, security, lighting, which is part of security, and the noise as well. I think we should do that in ways that are aesthetically pleasing as well. I'm not sure that a fence separating a path from the parking lot is aesthetically pleasing. So I think we'd need to carefully consider a proposal there that also keeps a nice rural character. Open space. On the one hand, yes, this has had an open space easement associated with it for some time. On the other, it's really the one parcel that is there adjacent to the commercial center of the town. And I do think that, when we look at the overall value to the town, I think enabling the sort of commercial center and I would say soul of the community to have the ability to meet its needs, it justifies the slight reduction or I think it's 8,400 square foot reduction in that open space. And so for me, that's a finding that I can make, right, in terms of the overall balance of the community interest and ability to gather. And when we do look at our surrounding towns, right, Portola Valley, et cetera, they do have a rural character as well as, frankly, a more developed center, which also leads to quite a bit of community, right? And I know folks have moved to Woodside for all of our own reasons. At the same time, PV is able to do these cool music festivals, et cetera, right? And it leads to a really good community. And when we think about health, safety, wellness, the one thing that's going to keep us all happy into old age is having strong friendships, right? And having those ability to sort of convene and commune with friends. So those are some sort of bigger picture thoughts. And I can certainly make the findings on this, but I do share the concerns around, let's get a screening plan, let's get input from neighbors, let's get, noise reduction plans around fencing, policing of the deliveries, all of those aspects. I would like us to sort of include that in a recommendation to council. But when I look at this on the balance, in terms of overall community input, the importance of having that community or commerce center to serve the community, I can make the findings and would be supportive of the measure in the aggregate.
All right. Following up on what Matt said, he made a number of good points, as did the other Matt and Richard, the other commissioner here. It seems like the two biggest holes in the current proposal are a screening plan and security. And I agree with Commissioner Gar that we need specifics on both before this should move forward. Or at least those should be specific, or town council should call out for specifics on both of those points before this should move forward. On the screening, because it's a stream corridor, I know you're constrained biologically to use riparian plants. In Portola Valley Town Center, they have a stream that runs through there, and with the native plantings they put in there, after a number of years, it's quite a jungle in there, and it provides quite effective screening. If there is a way to fit in a fence or a way to block the view of the neighbors so they don't just see a forest of cars, that would also be acceptable. If it required a variance from the Planning Commission to put in a solid fence, I would be supportive of that. And I think the paramount aspect of this is the safety and security aspect of it. I did not realize until listening to the ASRB meetings that there is a late night partying activity problem in this lot. And it would seem like we need to develop a comprehensive security plan for that. And part of that would be information gathering. Gates are one option, but there's no guarantee that the vehicles coming in and causing the problem are coming in after the business is closed. They may already be present at closing time. And I think it's not going to be a very workable solution if the restaurants close at 10 o'clock. If the gates come down and can't be opened after 10 o'clock, you're certainly going to have some sort of provision for the employees to leave and for customers that walk out the door at 10 o'clock to leave. And so you can certainly keep vehicles from coming in after hours, but it's not clear that that's the problem. And there are other potential solutions that have been mentioned earlier. We could have security cameras. We could have private security. I know there are a number of entities over in Portola Valley and in Woodside that use Woodside Patrol, and they're very responsive. I know that if there's any activity at Woodside Priory, they are like on site within 2 minutes and chasing people out of the lots there. So my thought would be the two aspects that need a lot more specifics are security and screening. The other aspect that seems to be really important is conformance with the conditional use permits on site. It's been discussed a lot tonight that there seems to be an overseeding problem. And if the town council were to direct to staff and to the town in general that the CUP conditions be enforced, I think a lot of those of the parking and circulation problems would go away. So I'm not sure how, I mean, this would be something for the town attorney and staff to deal with, but it would be nice to see at the town council meeting on October 22nd that the town council make a positive stand on enforcement of the CUP requirements. And if they choose to adopt the new limits in the expanded seat counts for the restaurant, or enforce the existing CUP, or come up with a new CUP that fits, that conforms with the parking as it exists right now, all of those would be potential options, because something needs to be enforced, and that would include enforcement of the limitations on delivery times. So those are my thoughts. Do we seem to have a consensus on anything, or?
Those three comments and conditions would be paramount on my list, including the conformity. So, like you mentioned, Lyle, either conforming to the new adopted CUP, which was proposed in the application, or the one that was proposed by or after COVID, I would think.
Well, the only CUPs that actually exist in written form are the one from 2015 and the one proposed. De facto, the restaurants have been exceeding the 2015 CUP and have been allowed to do that in the aftermath of COVID. And it's sort of up to town council as to what CUP they want to enforce. Now, if the town council chose to review this proposal and to approve it, and as part of that, they approved the new CUP, that would become effective immediately. Is that correct, Jean?
Yes, yes, it would become effective immediately.
And because the size of the parking lot would not change instantaneously, the site would still be underparked, but there would be, if the town council were to approve this package, then there would be a project underway to correct that situation. The other alternative for town council would be to go back to either the existing CUP, direct that it be enforced, or potentially staff could calculate what could be tolerated on the parking lot as it exists right now with the parklets in place, which is probably going to be, I would think, a smaller number, but I can't do real-time analysis on that.
There is currently outdoor seating in the front by Woodside Road.
I mean, the parklets exist right
Exists,
now.
just like they did during COVID. I haven't been there for a little while.
Any thoughts on that?
Specifically, so specifically on the trajectory of when the CU, well, yeah, let me maybe zero back. So I echo the thought on the enforcement. Right? I think that sounds like something that just needs to be looked at,
Something
right?
needs to be enforced.
It sounds like it's sort of order, 2X or something large. So I think that should be looked at.
Yeah, a lot of.
I think the numbers, where they're coming out look reasonable to me. It's an expansion that, I don't know, when I looked at Measure A, I sort of took it for granted that by adding outdoor seating, the restaurants would expand.
That was my interpretation as well.
I disagree. Forgive me, I disagree.
Look, folks,
Oh, that's
you
fine.
can,
You're
you can disagree. It's ability to disagree. I
But
stated.
we
that
can't,
my-
but Matt, we
So,
can't
wait,
take things
hang
for
on, hang on.
granted.
It's
We
an
can't take things for
interpretation. I
granted.
said my
It's a math
interpretation.
problem.
Hold on, Matt, my interpretation, right, is my interpretation. I'm entitled to that interpretation. You could have interpreted it differently, which is fine. My interpretation was that they would be that they would expand, right? And to me, it's reasonable that we're here, saying there's an expansion of parking as well as an expansion on the CUP to account for the outdoor dining. And the math does, like, letter of the law work, right? In terms of 2.5 times total seats, like, that's the number. It is maxed out, right? And that's a philosophical difference we may have, which is fine. And to me, it's reasonable. I also, I think Rowan made a great point, which is we are going to need to build 328 more units, right? What restaurants are going to serve the additional residents, right? We need to have, that's a roughly proportional growth on the 5,000 base residents of Woodside that we would expand our commercial center to account for the needs of those residents to also, congregate and commune with us, which I see as a good thing. So, I mean, for me, the new numbers look like a reasonable increase. There is going to be also development coming with the housing element, and I do think we should account for that. So to me, it makes sense.
I respectfully disagree. I think that's a naive interpretation at best.
You can call it naive. That's fine. We can disagree. I respect your opinion. You can respect mine as well. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
So Gene, do you have any thoughts on or Sage, do you have any suggestions on how we could turn these thoughts into recommendations?
Yes, we've taken some notes here about all of your concerns. I think we're hearing a shared set of concerns. As to the last point, I think what I'm hearing is that you would like us to convey to the council that you want them to take a close look at what do you do between now and when the parking lot is constructed, and how do you enforce a CUP and make sure that the parking and the seating is right-sized in that interim before the parking lot gets constructed.
My personal recommendation would be even stronger than that. Essentially, the CUPs have been unenforced for multiple years. And at this point, 3 years after COVID, there's no reason for that not to change as soon as possible. What it should change to, you can have different interpretations of, and what it should, and that may be affected by town council's decision on the project as a whole. In that if they decide to expand the parking and approve the package, then at least to my mind, the new proposed CUP seems reasonable. If they choose to reject the package and the parking proposal, then it's up to them to decide what CUP they want to enforce, but it would still be my opinion or strong recommendation that a CUP be enforced.
Understood. We can convey that as part of the staff report.
And it seems logical to have the one before the expansion. To me, that would be my perspective, is that we
If
should
they
be.
reject the parking expansion, I don't know what else.
Or I'm sorry, the point I was trying to make is before construction completes, so during the period between, assuming it does go through, right, that the lower numbers would be reasonable to enforce, because that's where we have the parking problem stemming from in the first place. Does that make sense?
Wait, what do you mean by the lower numbers?
The prior CUP from 2015, 2016.
Well, we've been running for 3 years with a number that's significantly higher than what's proposed in the new CUP.
I'm sorry, what is governing today? And apologies if I might be.
The 2016 CUP is in place today. And I think what I'm hearing from Commissioner Gar is it's something that we can convey to the council, the different, do you enforce the 2016 numbers before the parking lot gets built? Or do you allow for updated numbers, some interim period before the parking lot?
And there were no numbers put with the COVID, correct?
COVID didn't change numbers. It provided temporary CUPs to allow for the front yard outdoor dining.
It's a gray area. I don't know what the answer is in terms of the right number.
Well, I mean, as a practical matter, you have to consider the number of seats that are physically in play right now.
Yeah.
Which we've been running with for 3 years. It seems a little bit nonsensical to tolerate it for 3 years and
Yep.
till you expand the parking lot.
I think that's fair. It's just been at a period of sort of non-enforcement, right? And ambiguity. I don't have a good answer. I'm just thinking through it.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, identical thought. I mean, the official edition of the parklets is just a sort of a stamp as far as what's been going on up to this point, right?
Yeah.
So we've had the dining in the front, and we have, I understand, dining in the back that's outdoor. I'm not sure, but the count that some residents have made known to us, like 160 at I think it was the bakery. I'm not sure if it was one or the other. That certainly exceeds any CUP in 2015 or the current one that's proposed. So
I think we, yeah.
Yeah, we have all the numbers that are currently allowed under the current CUP.
Yeah.
If you're willing to say how many seats you have today, Tyler, I'll take.
but it's the outside seating.
Currently, we have indoors at Bucks, we have 109 seats. We can move our back table, which is the table in the back room, we can make some more seats there, but it's typically restricted. And then we have about 60 to 65 outside. I think it's about 60. The benches and everything. So we're over, but we rarely sit over the 100 in front. The bakery currently has 79 inside. There's 50 or 65 in the backyard. So right there, they're at 144 before the additional 22 proposed in the patio, which would bring them to a total of 166 based off of my count. I could be off by a couple, but I've counted a couple times.
And then the new proposed numbers, I was 120 plus 24 bucks and 95 plus 22 at the bakery for 144. Yeah. Or 117 rather.
170.
Yeah.
At night, they will have 166 seats.
Well, that's honest. No, I'm saying that's honest.
I mean, my recommendation would be like, those are all larger than
Absolutely.
even the future CUP. So again, we're talking about the hypothetical, if this were to pass. It seems like the logical thing to do would be to enforce the future CUP, which is a reduction from now. It at least alleviates the parking issue for that period of time, but also maybe take some of the more egregious violations off the table that have been going on.
It would give us a limit to enforce to.
Yeah.
We'll totally comply with the updated CUP we plan to. It's been very difficult for us to exercise flex seating, which we agreed to do with the town and the bakery when we noticed the bakery completely violating that at every opportunity. You can simply call today and they'll tell you you can have a party of 130, which for CUP allows 95 and
Such an honest
Right.
brother.
All right, all right. So, all right, so, Commissioner Apfel, did you have anything to add on this aspect, or you're just gonna vote no?
I don't know what we're voting on. Are we,
It
are we
makes sense
voting
to
to,
kind of
are we
take
voting,
stock of where we are.
are we voting
Let's
to?
take stock of where we are.
as written?
Um,
Are we, what are we voting, are we voting to approve as written? Yeah, I'm a no.
No, we're not. I am not.
I'm in the same boat. I think so. My perspective is just try to summarize it, which is general support for the plan with conditions of more detailed screening, noise, lighting, security plans. I failed to mention sorry, the CUP enforcement. And then also the piece I failed to mention earlier, which is on the path, ensuring that we do have a path that is open to equestrian as well as hiker, biker for safe routes to school.
That is a good point that we hadn't discussed. I would agree with what you were saying very early on when Sage was doing his presentation. Essentially, what we've had for quite a long time is a multi-use trail, a de facto multi-use trail, because I mean, kids and pedestrians and dog walkers and kids on bikes will use it. And we don't have any signage, and it seems to work just fine. So I'm not quite sure what value the signs are adding, but I think we should basically accept Path C as a use trail.
Okay. Yeah.
And to be, it may have sounded like I was advocating for signs earlier. I don't feel strongly for signs.
Okay, yeah.
And what about reducing the slope on the beginning of the path from Cañada? That was a recommendation by one of the residents. I don't know how feasible that would be.
It's
I heard it differently.
It did look like Path C was
Oh.
slightly reduced from current. I mean, not by a material amount, but
Yeah, I mean, no one.
Adding some fill, and
So,
no one's complaining about it.
I mean,
We didn't hear anything about it.
it's equivalent or maybe slightly better than the current path, just based on the way that God made that.
Yeah.
patch of-
well, it was yeah. It looked like it was slightly lower. I think roughly 0.5%.
Yeah.
The other thing would be like, the current path is it's again kind of de facto. It's not well constructed. So my assumption is that I think it's going to be a sort of constructed path, which likely is going to have a better surface, take some of the angst out of the slope.
All right.
I think.
That's a point. So we're just not decided or in agreement regarding the CUP, the enforcement of, right, the numbers, or are we?
Should we take stock of where we are in terms of support for the overall sort of big
Yes.
picture? 'Cause
Are we being asked to make a vote tonight?
You're being asked to make a recommendation to the council.
Oh, well, okay.
And there is a resolution in your packet.
Okay. And so are we being asked to vote on the resolution or just make changes to the resolution?
You could make changes to the resolution, but the resolution is stated as a recommendation to the council, and it goes through each of the entitlements.
Okay.
But what we've heard you want to do is add a number of conditions to that
Yes.
so that those are conveyed to the council as concerns which you are recommending be addressed if the council were to support the project.
So it sounded like you were in general favor of the proposal, but the additional recommendation or the additional specific item you wanted added was there needs to be a very specific screening plan.
Yeah, I had my suggestion would be we maybe agree on which amendments we'd like to make and then vote on an amended piece. The ones that I had was more details around screening, lighting, the gates, security, the details around the multi-use path. We also talked about the enforcement of things like the trucks and rules around that, as well as the CUP enforcement. Those were the big ones I had. The other issue, I keep finding other things in my notes, is I would also recommend lifting the outdoor music restriction from it. I think that I'm biased. We just played the Woodside School Foundation appreciation event, our bluegrass band with light amplified music. People seem to really enjoy it. I think those sorts of things should be allowed, but I'm biased as a musician there.
All right. So the delivery hours and enforcement of that is part of the CUP because that's called out.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
And if there are violations of that, that's taken care of there. So you are asking that that the proposal is written and the recommendation of council have added to it a requirement for a specific planting plan or the screening between the extension of the parking lot and the neighbor.
Yeah, and maybe we can say it's planting, sort of comprehensive planting, fencing, lighting that sort of overall
All around.
define the character.
North and west and.
Did you have thoughts on the lighting as far as the tall lighting versus the 5-foot lighting?
I do think reduction from the current, so I mean, 12 is better than 14. It feels like 5 would be low enough that there would be shadows that would maybe compromise security. So, but I think ideally it can go lower, but 5 feels really low from a safety and security standpoint to me. Yeah, and I think those are 12 as far as I understand.
Since they're,
Oh, 5. Okay. We can
Yeah.
go look at it.
since they're downlighting, then 5-footers would have a, a small lit area, much smaller lit area. You'd have to have a lot more of them. And I believe that was indicated earlier also. So, but if they work, if you have to have more of them, and if they work,
I mean, there's sort of a contradiction between trying to keep the lighting discreet and trying to heighten security.
Yep. Yep.
with the screening, if it's proper screening, then the lighting issue, I think, is muted. In other words, it's less of an issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say the lighting has to come down from 12, but I'd want to see that in the, in the follow-up to see what would the effects be, maybe with the screening. It's contained even with the 12-footers to a place where that becomes acceptable.
And so I guess what you're asking for is a comprehensive planting and screening plan with the lights worked in to essentially block the view of the neighbors so they don't have parking lot lighting.
Correct. And I think, I mean, Commissioner Aftrell said it well, which is often there is quite a bit of diligence around the details of these plans, and I think that would be good to see.
Okay. And
These will be issues for the city council to resolve.
well, it is our adding the recommendation that the council not approve this without absent a specific lighting, screening, and planting plan.
They could choose to ignore
Security.
That would be our recommendation.
Yes, that would be our recommendation. And then on the multi-use trail aspect of it, I think at least the two of us were in alignment that we just accept C as a multi-use trail.
The three of us, I would not fix what hasn't been broken just because you have a slightly different path of the path. It's going to serve the same function, and I assume it's going to be the same width and maybe even improved. So,
Well, the current path is totally impromptu and unimproved, so any improvement is by default.
It's always the most optimal path design for traffic is just where it ended up, right?
There's nowhere to go but up. And then the other aspect of it was the CUP.
security also.
Oh, yes. I think there needs to be a more comprehensive security plan beyond gates. And part of that would be some investigational effort to determine when the vehicles or, I mean, who and what is going on there right now.
I mean, maybe there's also signage that could be proposed, right? No loitering or certain hours, et cetera, that maybe there's a standard that's actually set that then the sheriff can also, enforce and folks are aware of. I haven't known about these late night parties. I'm not doubting they're happening, but like news to me, I don't think there's things posted there about it either. So maybe like setting those expectations more clearly may help.
Yeah, that would be one aspect of it. And, signs that there's, 24-hour private security, whatever, because I mean, I know that it would certainly be nice if I were the neighbor and I was listening to people drinking beer and throwing cans into the creek and playing music, that I could call up somebody and in 2 or 5 minutes, they'd show up and chase them off. And I think if that happened often enough, it would stop.
Yeah.
Quiet hours posted at a campsite, right? You can call in the right once you've passed a certain hours.
Well, it's not quite clear. And I mean, this would be part of the investigation part of this is it seemed like if you were picking random locations in Woodside to drink beer and play music, you wouldn't go to that lot. You would have other better alternatives. Unless there were other reasons why you were there. But that's just me.
Yeah, I don't think it's a criminal element that does this. So potentially a guard would probably be a good start.
But I think part of it is finding out what the problem is and then developing a comprehensive security plan around it.
Completely agree.
Through the chair, if I may, just to kind of summarize what we've heard. We have a draft resolution in the packet. Sounds like there is at least a majority that is supportive of that resolution with some modifications. And those modifications would be recommendations to the town council to not approve the project without a specific planting, lighting, and security plan, to allow multi-use trail, including bikes, pedestrians, and equestrians, with the chosen alternative path C, and in the security plan that the applicant should look into including security on site or some type of 24-hour patrol available.
And the CUP.
May I ask 2 others that I thought I heard? An exploration into more of a noise control, which would deal with deliveries and what area deliveries could be made into. And then you had suggested the council look at allowing outdoor music.
I do. I think with restrictions that we talked through some of this with the meeting on the Village Hub as well, and with our restrictions, et cetera, like there shouldn't be midnight that there's a band playing. But I do think that frankly that adds to ambiance with outdoor music, and the sound doesn't carry that far.
Well, the latest opening hour for any business there is what, 10 p.m.?
I believe it's 11.
Okay, 11 p.m. And are you willing to limit it to unamplified music?
9
I'm a
p.m.
guitar player, you get drowned out by the mandolin.
9 p.m.
I mean, honestly, like amplified gets difficult, right? Because like even if it's just like a single person playing and singing, they do tend to just use light amplification. So I think it's like tasteful amplification should be allowed, but it's the type of thing that a neighbor should be able to complain if it's offensive. My 2 cents.
And this would be on special occasions during the year.
That's one opinion. And
I'm not
I would support that. Village Hub allows it. The only neighbor that came by and had something to say about it was someone who came and said, "Oh, it looks like there's some fun stuff happening here," and wanted to meet folks in the community.
At this time, I'm not supportive of music.
Unamplified?
Where exactly would this music playing
There,
from?
there was an evening that my wife and I were at, actually the whole family, and Bucks had an unamplified bluegrass band.
In the back, in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would be supportive of it if it had some kind of a potential schedule. Could be impromptu, but with some kind of a permit.
Yeah. Maybe a limitation or unamplified would be a reasonable restriction.
I would be supportive of unamplified. Yes, and the other aspect that at least I felt strongly about is that when town council considers this, this project has to start with enforcement of a CUP for the shopping center or for Kenyatta Corners and enforcement of that. And it is up to town council based on whether they approve or reject this, what that CUP is. Is that reasonable?
Yes.
So given those amendments, are we ready to have a vote on this?
Motion, second.
Someone want to make a motion?
Motion to accept or approve the proposal contingent upon the four, well, anyway, contingent upon the amendments that we have discussed and voiced to you.
We have a second?
I would second.
Chair Weaver,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gar,
Yes.
Commissioner Apfel,
No.
Commissioner Aguinaldo.
Yes. And if I could add that with the adoption of the CUP that's proposed currently, that would certainly be a reduction in the number of patrons that come to the restaurant, and obviously would decrease the congestion that we have.
100%.
Thank you. And just to note that this action is not appealable since it's a recommendation to the town council. So town council action will be final on this project.
And then Sage, did you have anything else to report tonight?
Nothing further to report tonight.
All right, with that, I will bring the meeting to a close.
Thank you, folks.